Good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, type in good morning. Kelly, good morning.
Oh
Harneet,
my!
good morning.
Oh my
Dale, good
ears!
morning. Let's type that. Let's
Oh
type
my!
that in, my friends. Dale, good morning. Kamal, good morning. Christopher, good morning. Jaspreet, ignore. Isabel, Edric, please, could you put yourself on mute, my friend, for a moment? Actually, for the duration of our course, we're doing this on chat. We want to save bandwidth, my friends. Good morning, Michael, Rahman. Thank you, Edric. Yeah, the way we're going to do this. So we're going to be using the chat bar. We're going to be using the visuals, and you're going to getting audio. There are some occasions when you can unmute, mainly during, let's say, office time immediately after class. But because of the nature of this course, we really want to make sure that things don't collapse and we use our bandwidth well. And as part of what we're going to be doing, I just want to make sure right now, we'll have a look on the screen. Can everyone see a little red dot moving? If you can see that, type in yes. Perfect. All right, terrific. Thank you, Christopher, Max, Isabel. Thank you. So this is me, right? Well, it's not me. It's a little dot that's being moved by me. And what I'm going to do at the beginning of each class is I'm going to go over what I call our menu. So you look at it right now. I want to make really, really efficient use of our time. You saw that the class begins at 10 a.m. sharp, not a minute before, not a minute after. And the class is being recorded, Sahil, that's right. And so the way things work is we start at 10 a.m. sharp. And we have, technically, the university allots us 2 hours and 50 minutes. But look, there's absolutely no way I can teach for 2 hours and 50 minutes. And so the way things work is I want us to do what's on the menu for that day. And that's typically going to mean that we end somewhere around 12. The farthest I'm going to ever go is 12:15. So that's my cutoff point. This class, no matter what happens, ends at 12:15, no later than that. And then after that, it's office time, right? Thank you, my friend. And one of the things also is if you need to go to the washroom breaks aren't going to be scheduled or anything like that. You get up, you do it. That's one of the benefits of being, not having your video feed. But if you miss something, the recording's there for that. But there's something about doing this in a live format that I've found makes this subject matter much more durable in the manner that you're going to learn it. And so that's how we're going to proceed. You stay on mute, and when I prompt you, you can write in the chat bar. Speaking about the chat bar, one of the things that I found from experience, so this is sort of some technicalities here, is that when someone's typing in the chat bar, like for instance, a moment ago, Edric was typing something, and I could see that Edric was typing, it lets me know that someone's typing, but what I found is it tends to chop the audio. So other students, all of a sudden, they don't hear my voice as well. So if you have something that you absolutely must write in the chat bar, if it's something that's more involved than just, let's say, a brief sentence, what I recommend that you do is you open up a Word file or a text file, right? Just a little post-it on another thing on your computer. Type out what you have to say there, and you can even use, let's say, spell check to make sure everything looks good, and then you can craft very carefully your question, and then when you're ready, just paste it in the public chat bar, right? That way it's much simpler, and the whole time that you're going to be crafting what you have to say, you're not going to be chopping off the bandwidth for everybody else, right? Also, don't raise your hand. I know there's a hand raising function, but frankly, I'm multitasking when I'm teaching. There's no way I can pay attention to that much detail. Just by the mere fact that you're typing in the chat bar, that's like raising your hand, right? And so that'll be just fine. You can always say, I have a question or something like that, or just go ahead and ask it. But I'm not going to be using those gizmos. I like to keep it simple because on my end, it's a lot, right? And there's only so much that I can handle. So just limit yourself to the chat bar. That should be just fine. All right? Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. Perfect. And you'll notice I will check in on you very frequently. Pretty much every 2 minutes, I'm going to be checking in on you for something, and I'll ask small words, right? So nothing too complicated. But as things evolve, we're going to make good use of this, and it's nice now that I remember when the pandemic started and a lot of us veered to this online format. We weren't all quite sure what to do, but I think at this point now I'm really comfortable with the medium, and I've got a format that works well for me. On that note, let's have a look at what's on the menu for today. I know what's on your mind, in addition to knowing, how much time we're going to be spending together. And I've just told you, maximum we finish at at 12:15. I know what's on your mind is, well, how am I going to be graded? Is this course going to be hard? And so on. So the first thing I want to do is overview the course. And the best way to do that, in my experience, is to look at our main document. Now, what I call a main document is often called a syllabus or a course description. You have it at the top of the Moodle page. So when you go on our Moodle page, I've got this nice poster. I've got this kind of one-line blurb that captures, I think, what I want to accomplish in this course. And then right beneath it, you should have something that says our main document. Can everyone go on that main Moodle page and confirm that they can see the thing that says main document? And when you click it, you should see something that you can save as a PDF. If you can do that, type in yes. And if you cannot, type in no. So go ahead and verify that you can have access to that. This is really important. I want to make sure that everyone can have access to that file. Type in yes once you've confirmed that you can get that PDF. Perfect. And by the way, kids, I'm having breakfast. I don't know about you, but you should be having breakfast as well and having coffee, because this is going to be a tough course. All right, good. So the main document, this is kind of like if you were renting an apartment or something, it'd be like your lease. This is where all the fine details are going to be. What we're going to do is we're going to read it together, so we'll spend some time doing that. And then chances are it'll answer all of your questions, because I've made it very thorough. And it's good for you and it's good for me. It's a document that we can refer to. It's the blueprint of how we're going to spend our time. And then finally, if you have any further questions, once we've had a look at the main document, then that'll be a great time to ask. So I've put aside some time to do that. I'm looking at the clock and we've got lots to do. I'm hoping that that won't last any more than, let's say, 40 minutes. All right. But my goal is that at least you have a good amount of clarity coming in. I wouldn't say perfect clarity, because, you know, maybe you'll have some questions that will occur to you in the course of next week, in which case you can ask again. But at least that everyone, once we pass this threshold over here, we have a clear sense of what's happening, and also a clear sense of whether or not you want to continue or you want to drop. Because look, you're facing a fork in the road, right? You either do this course or you don't. If you do it, then you bloody do it. It's going to be a tough course. It's going to require a lot of you. And so you need 100% commitment. If you're going to drop, that's cool as well. So you got to be smart about what you're going to do. I was an undergraduate before. I know what it's like. You have to be realistic about what your amount of energy and time you have at your disposal. And this course is going to make a lot of demands on you. Right, so make that decision, and then if you need to leave, that's cool. Just drop the course. I'm fine with that. I will totally understand, and I'll leave a spot for somebody else. But if you're going to stick with it, then you stick with it. So what we'll do is we'll do that, and then you can make that decision for yourself. As a transition, what we'll do after is, well, look, it's an introduction to formal logic, and I mean this really seriously. I take that responsibility. Like, we need a really gradual ramp, right? Like, I'm not assuming anything. All I'm assuming in this class is that you're an adult, you can speak English, and that's pretty much it. And we're going to go from there. So it's really, really going to be introductory. And so I don't even assume that you know what formal logic even is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by saying, what is formal logic? After we've done that, and this is probably something you should really pay attention to before you decide whether to stay with the course or drop, I'm going to give you a spooky preview. I've said on several occasions already that this is a tough class. It is. And Edric, I see you typing in the chat bar. If it's absolutely necessary, please, like I just said, take that advice, open up a separate file and do that there. And if nothing trivial also, right? So I don't see that there's any reason to sort of ask any questions right now, because I'm just previewing the content. And by spooky preview is, I'm trying to spook you. I want to give you a sense right away of how difficult this course is going to be, for two reasons. One, if you're going to be scared, you might as well be scared now and just drop. Two, if you're going to be scared, then at least I want you to realize how much work it's going to require of you to reach the stage where you're able to do well in the course. So right away, what I'm going to do is basically preview the end skills you're going to have at the end of this course. So what are you going to look like in 12 weeks from now as far as your abilities? I will show you that right away. It's going to feel, if I did everything right, a little terrifying, and that's the point. But there's going to be good news. So that's the bad news, but the good news is I'm going to be with you, and we're going to do this together. So once I've introduced to you what the formal logic even is, and then I've shown you concretely what that's going to mean for you, then we're going to spend the bulk of our time looking at 5 kinds of relations between claims. So you've noticed here I've underlined that. the things here that are underlined on our menu are where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. So I said maximum about 40 minutes on reviewing the course. And then the remainder of the course, we're going to be already learning some content. And this course is really skill-based. So everything we learn is a skill you need to practice. So it's going to be lots of homework. Once we're going to be done with the class, I'll tell you what that homework is, and then I'll say goodbye to you, and you're going to start that homework. You're going to get to work right away, right? And that's what we're going to do. Office time is typically immediately after, so if you need to stick around to talk to me, I'll be there. I'll be the last one to leave this chat room. So that's what's on the menu for today. Does that sound like a plan, my friends? If everything is clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Good. We know what we're going to do. We know how we're going to spend our time. All right. Let's not waste a single minute. Life matters. Cool. Perfect. All right. Let's do this. Let's go over our main document together. So you know where to get it. I recommend you grab yourself a PDF and you keep it offline. Let's have a look at this main document. At the top, you have some information, right? Here you've got my email. I don't teach by email, and I'd rather you try to avoid email for a couple of reasons. One of them is just creates a lot of work. And so he'll hold that question. We'll get to that in a moment. Great question. Just hold on to that one. Like I said, we'll get to these things in a stepwise manner. So right now I'm just going over my email. So if you have a question to ask me in class. The reason is, if you ask me by email, first of all, there's a strong chance I won't reply because I don't teach by email. And second of all, it will only benefit you, right? Like if I reply to you by email, that's great. Let's say you're unclear about something and I explain it to you. It's going to be really painful because I have to type that stuff out. You have to type out your question. I have to type out my explanation. And moreover, the only person who's going to benefit is you. So there's an email there. That's terrific. And I'm happy that it exists. And do get in touch with me if you really do need me. But if you have a course-related question, always try to ask that question in class. That way I can benefit everyone. And at the appropriate time, like when it shows up, when it's relevant, right? Office time is not relevant. I don't have a room. But what I've done is I've scheduled it immediately after class. So instead of meeting some other time, I know you're here. Everyone showed up. You're having coffee. We're going to have our Monday breakfasts together. Let's just stick around at the end of class and I'll be there to help you. And typically that's always been the best time for office. All right. Now, and Sahil, I'll answer your question immediately. How many hours of homework should we expect outside of class time? Put aside, I don't know, an hour a day. So 7 hours a week and a full hour a day at least. But lots of homework. It's going to be lots of homework. And we'll see this in a moment, Sahil, as you'll see. Let's have a look at the course description, and I'll mention this in the course description. This passage over here is one that I've written. So the university has a little blurb for this course. It doesn't say much. This is one that I've written. Each instructor teaches these courses slightly differently. Here's my vision of how we're going to spend this course. If this was a company, this would be our mission statement. Let's have a look at this. We routinely give and are expected to give reasons for what we believe and say. Yet, for our reasons to actually offer rational support, those reasons have to be structured in just the right way. If science tracks the truth or falsehood of individual claims, then logic is the discipline that tracks relations among claims. Logic is not math or computer programming, but in order to attain greater clarity, contemporary logicians use notations inspired by algebra. Using these notations, students will learn different ways of testing an argument's validity. Mastering these useful skills will require a lot of at-home practice. But as this is an introductory course, no prior background in philosophy or logic is required. The overarching hope is that by improving your logical skills, you will notice an increase in intellectual rigor in all of your other courses. And you'll notice here, and this circles back to Sahil's question, a lot of at-home practice. One of the things that really distinguishes this course is it's a lot of homework. And it's practice. I really like the word practice, right? That's crucial. You're going to have to practice a lot. If you are not prepared to practice a lot this course, I mean, invariably I end up failing large segments every time I teach this class. My dream is to never fail anyone. Let's make that dream happen, right? And that's only going to be dependent on you. But be mindful of that. So on average, you have to put aside at least an hour and a quality hour at that per day, right? And spread that out all the time from now until the final exam. It's going to require a lot of homework, so be warned. And you'll see why in a moment when I show you my spooky preview and you can get to see what those skills are. So that's the let's say the bad news or the good news, depending on how you want to slice it. The good news is the zero textbook stuff. Hey, you don't have to buy a textbook. What do you think, people? How does that make you feel? No textbook. Yes. Yay, indeed. Relieved indeed. You know, textbooks now cost a bloody fortune, right? Like, they gouge you. It's insane. Like, talk about inflation. The grocery's bad enough. Grocery bill's bad enough. It's like, and the reason why you don't have a textbook, there's a couple of reasons why you don't have a textbook. And by the way, it's not, I don't do this in all my classes. I'm not dogmatic about this. Like, for instance, I teach metaphysics on Wednesdays, and I'm using a textbook for that because I actually found one. It's not too expensive and it actually suits my needs. But the reason why you're not going to have a textbook is as follows. I own like hundreds of logic textbooks, and there's not a single one that I actually like perfectly. Like, I like aspects of each one, but then there's these drawbacks and aspects I don't like to each one. So what I've done over the years is I've essentially created a hybrid, right? I kept all the parts that I like, and I've created my own teaching materials, and I'll provide those for you. And that way it's cheap, it's zero. I have complete control over it. So let's say I find a tiny little typo or mistake, I can always improve it on the spot. It can grow each time I teach the course. You know, the materials can grow and improve. And so, and it also suits, because I have my own views as to, you know, in logic. I'm a professional philosopher and I publish on this. And so I get to tailor this just to so I teach a system that I'm comfortable with. So there's no textbook, so that's the good news. I will provide you all of the materials. Now, don't be fooled. It isn't because there's no textbook that there's no homework. That is a wrong inference. Definitely lots of homework. All right, so each Monday at 10 a.m. we're going to meet. Notice here, I'm just going to say one briefly about this passage here. My assumption is that you're self-motivated adults, so online attendance will not be taken and participation will not be graded. All right, so there's no separate grade for participation and attendance. If you show up, and you have to show up because it's a synchronous class, it's because you see value in showing up. And trust me, you'll need every workout possible with your trainer, that's me, in order to succeed. Like, literally by paying tuition now, you've booked yourself 11 workouts with your trainer, less if you count the exams actually, or something like this. And so don't be a fool. Take advantage of it. Like, when we show up, we're having these workouts together, and we're going to practice our skills. We're going to learn them and then practice them. Take advantage of that. But there's no participation grade, attendance. That's just childish. You're in university. We shouldn't have any of that nonsense, in my opinion. So if you miss a class, you've always got the recording. That said, some of the stuff that you're going to be graded on is going to happen during class. If you miss that, you get a big fat zero. So the recordings can only do so much. My recommendation to you is show up every Monday, caffeinated with a meal, jam with me, give it your all, and then a couple of days later, rewatch the whole thing. Rewatch the whole recording as you do your homework. And then that's good because you can skip over the parts that you understand well, and you can go over the parts more slowly where you were a bit lost, and that can help you out a lot, right? So that's, I think, the proper approach to do it. The bad approach to do it is not showing up, and that's going to be a recipe for disaster. You can't talk or type and address questions to the recording, but you can to me because I'm flesh and blood and I'm there. All right? Is that clear, everyone, about the format? If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. We're going to do this step by step. I'm keeping an eye on the time, but we're doing great. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at the next page of our thing where I'm talking about how we're going to be graded. The math is going to be fairly straightforward. So for instance, if something is graded, let's say you have a test that's graded out of, it's worth 20%, it'll be graded out of 20. Like, it's always going to be really, really easy arithmetic. No fractions, it's just basic integers. And so for instance, you're going to have this month 5 drills that you have to complete. They're going to be worth 2%. 5 times 2 means 10%. So they're going to be graded out of 2, and they're going to add up to 10%. And that's going to happen throughout the first month. This first month, I'm going to have you do a lot of repetitive tasks that are really, I wouldn't say stupid, but simple, right? And that's why I've taken the Karate Kid as my logo. Who here has seen the Karate Kid? I don't care which reboot, which version. Who's seen the Karate Kid? Type in yes if you have, no if you haven't. It's a movie. The original, the sequel, no, yes, good. Okay, so that gives me a sense. Well, look, they're great movies. I recommend the original one personally, but that's because I'm old. I'm vintage, you know. Have a look if you haven't. It's a great movie. If you want a motivational movie, oh man, that's great. And in the movie, I've put little videos so you can see clips of the scenes. This first month, I'm going to have you do what Mr. Miyagi, who's the like karate teacher, has his pupil do wax on, wax off. Like he has him do all these chores. They're very repetitive. They're very mundane. They don't feel like they're doing karate, but it ends up having all sorts of strategic value later on. It turns out he was training his body to do something extraordinary. It's the same thing with this course. For the first month, I'm going to have you do wax on, wax off. I'm going to have you do all these drills, and they're going to be repetitive, and they're going to look really kind of mind-numbing, but in the second month, they're really going to pay off. To sort of give you a bit of a reward and an incentive to do it, I'll allocate 10% for that, and that'll be the drills. And that's going to be based on the content we learned today. So what we're going to learn today is going to enable you to start those drills right away. 5 times 2 means 10%, and that's it. And they'll be accessible on Moodle. Once the class is done, I press a button, and all of that is available. All right? So that's going to be 10%. Are there any questions? If everything is clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. So I'm going to have you do boring stuff for a whole month, at least 3 weeks. Clear if it's clear, a question if you got a question. Okay, cool. We're clear on that. That's terrific. Quizzes. Quizzes. What I do is I front load quizzes as a way of, and oh, Sahil's got a great question. Will there be a lot of English writing like an English class? No writing per se, but you'll have to understand language. So you won't have to write language, English language, but you'll have to read some English, especially in the first month. Sahil, does that answer your question? You will have to read some English because we'll work from language. Cool. All right. Quizzes. I will hold 3 quizzes throughout the term, and the quizzes are meant to give you kind of a trial run for the tests that weigh more. So the quizzes are worth 10% each, and you'll notice here the tests are worth more, so 20% here, 25 and 25, and the quizzes are ways for you to sample how you're doing, to see if you're doing well. 3 will be held throughout the term, and I will count only your best 2 results. So 2 times 10 makes 20. And you'll notice here there's 3 dates because there's going to be 3 held throughout the term, and I will keep your best 2. The obvious smart thing to do is you do all 3, and we'll see how it happens. But it's okay, and it happens once in a while that there's something you don't sort of understand immediately. And if that happens, that will absorb that learning curve, right? We'll just drop your worst one. So obviously on all the content that we're going to be doing, 3 quizzes, worth 10% each, and I hold 3 of those, but I keep your best 2 results. Okay? Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Beautiful. All right. Looking good, looking good. All right. We have then tests. Now, the structure of this course is threefold. So you've seen on the main Moodle page, there's 3 videos. Well, the semester lasts 3 months. Well, how about this? It's really dumb. I'm going to teach you 3 skills over 3 months, roughly 1 month per skill. Well, the first skill that you're going to learn is called Symbolization. So that'll be month 1. And we're going to have a test on that at the end of that month, which will be January 23rd. The next skill that we're going to have, and you'll notice it starts really quickly. January 3rd is coming up pretty quickly. The next skill is going to be called Truth Tables. That's the second skills. It'll be during the second month. It will have a second test, and that'll be held on February 27th. And then finally, we're going to have the final skill that we're going to learn, which is called Derivations. That's going to be worth 25%, and we're going to spend a little over a month on this one. I think it's something like 3 weeks on this. I think we're going to spend something like 4 weeks on this, and then 5 weeks on this. And the reason for that is, that should be a 5, it gets harder and harder as it goes. So there's a reason why I'm teaching you these skills in the order that I'm teaching them. One of them is they logically depend on one another. And another one is they're an ascending level of difficulty. So if you can imagine a staircase, right, they're going to get harder and harder as we go throughout the semester. And so it's kind of like I've tried to motivate you also with the Karate Kid. There's the big showdown at the end, right? So yes, we're going to start off stupid with wax on and wax off, but at the end, you're going to have to, we're going to compete. It's going to be a big thing. It's going to be the big challenge. The last exam is going to be on April 17th, and that's not during regular class time. That's during the official exam period, which means it's going to be starting earlier, so at 8:30 in the morning, because that's scheduled by the exams, by the university. And you've noticed here, actually I shouldn't put this little star for the drills, but for the quiz and the symbolization, the tests, I say quizzes and tests are held during class time and cannot be missed. Also, cheating of any sort will get you expelled. So these things happen, with the exception of the last one, and with the exception of the drills that you can do at home, these all happen in class. So all of this over here, that's going to happen during regular class time. And when we get near these things, I'm your trainer. I want you to succeed. I'll prepare you for these. So I'll talk about them again. Today, we're just doing one wash. I want to talk about them because we're looking at our main document. But as we near the first quiz or the first test, I'll talk about them again, and I'll prepare you so that you go in ready. You'll never be unprepared if you do everything I tell you to do. And the quizzes are going to look just like the homework, and the test is going to look just like the quiz. So basically, if you do everything I tell you to do, it should just be more of the same. Only at one point, we'll be sort of keeping track of the grades. All right? Is that clear, everyone, or do you have a question? If everything is clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. And the tests will last the whole duration of the class, by the way. I forgot to mention that. So 3 hours. So normally I said we finish at 2:15, but for tests, we'll use the whole time. Yeah, the whole time. Edric asks, final exam, do we attend in class or is it online? It's all in online, Edric. All online and synchronous. Yeah, great question. So all online and all synchronous. So there's a start time, the questions become available, and the way it's going to work is I'll make available to you a Word file that's going to have for you to type in, and then you'll have 3 hours to type it in, save it as a PDF, and upload it. Yeah. And all right, so Gusharanjit asks, test 3 will be cumulative. Yes and no. No in the sense that it's going to be on derivations, not the things like truth tables or symbolization. But yes in the sense that what explains what the hell we're doing when we're doing that is going to be presupposing all of this content that we learned before, right? So remember I gave you the analogy that there's steps, right? If I started off by teaching you the third skill, it would barely make any sense to you. But if you do the first skill and then the second skill, and by the time you reach the third skill, it will make sense, right? And you will be good at it precisely because you will have understood what we did prior. Gursharanjit, does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Perfect. Good. And like think about like these three skills. Like imagine I'm your personal trainer and you say, I want to get fit. I used to work as a personal trainer and so I want to get fit. I want to get strong. And I say, well, look, we're in a pinch. I don't want to spend too much time. How about I teach you the 3 power lifts, like squat, bench, and deadlift, right? And then we spend a month on each of those, right? Or something like that. That's basically the idea. This is going to be your starter kit for formal logic. There's more you could be doing. So I want to be clear about that. As a result of having taken this course, you're not the be-all and end-all of logic. Trust me. There's way more that you could be learning, but this will be a great starter kit for you if, in my opinion, if you know these 3 things, you have been introduced to logic. That means you've got what it would take for you to move to the next level, and that would be intermediate logic, right? So we also offer that, and I teach that on occasion. But that's how we're going to do things. Here I've got a bunch of dates. Those are university dates. Have a look at those. I've also added the grading scale so you know what to expect. This is how KPU grades things. I do give a little disclaimer here. I say to form a realistic picture, averages in philosophy courses tend to hover around 68%, plus or minus 2. Naturally, the statistic does not imply that you will get this numerical result. In this course, the grades earned by a student are reflective solely of that student's individual performance and are not doctored into any kind of collective curve. So here's the thing with group averages. I don't care much about them. I grade what you basically write on paper, in this case on file, when you turn in your result, when you turn in your exams and your quizzes. If you got it right, you got it right, you get the marks. If you got it wrong, you got it wrong, and you don't get the marks. I don't care how all that adds up. If I have to fail the entire class, I will, and I won't lose a night's sleep over it. Conversely, if everyone aces it, I also don't care. Because either way, I'll have a demonstrable paper trail for why people got the grades that they did. This is logic. There's nothing subjective about anything that we're going to be doing, right? And so it's on you. And individual performances means doesn't matter where the whole class goes. I'm just going to be grading what you did. And I'm not grading your life. I'm just grading your performance, right? Just like literally what you wrote down during the exam time. So during exam days, try to be at your sharpest, right? Because if you were really smart a couple hours before the exam, or you were really smart a couple of hours after, but you felt really dumb and confused during the exam, unfortunately, that's when I'm taking my measurement, right? So I'm going to give you tricks, kind of like same mentalities for the karate trainer, right? To perform well on competition day, because I really want you to do well, all right? With that in mind, I'm going to use the approach called the real world for lateness. What happens if you turn in work late? Let's say you've got an exam, the upload is due at 1 p.m. and you're 1 minute late. What grade do you get? A big, fat 0. Terrific. And Samuel, I noticed, was the first one to type. Samuel's taking classes with me, so he knows how I roll, right? There's no lateness, this percentage off or this many. There's no late anything. So it's a really straightforward policy. If you miss something, what grade do you get? Not just late, but you missed it. What grade do you get? Again, a big fat 0. Good. We understand each other. Let's say you were a minute late. You showed up. You did the exam. But when you were uploading, you had some technical problems. And so the upload spot closed on you because the deadline had passed. And you email me your exam as an attachment with a great story of what happened. What grade do you get? You get 0. That's right. But it was a terrific story. Like it was really a wonderfully well spelled out. And you say, please, professor, please, please. And I can sense that you're crying. You attach a video of yourself on the phone crying. What grade do you get? That's right. Okay, so there you go. We understand each other. So what does that mean? Well, it means the following. Because the deadlines in this class are strict, and notice, when I start at 10 a.m., I start at 10 a.m. I don't start at 10:01 a.m. I start at 10. Everything's about precision, and I'm holding myself to the same standards I'm holding you. How do we make sure, what's a trick to make sure that we don't get 0? Because 0 sucks. So let me be clear about this. I don't want you to get 0. So, okay, and I'm not going to change or bend or make exceptions to the policy that's on the screen right now. So what do? What is it that you can do on your end to make sure you don't get 0? What are some suggestions to avoid turning in stuff late? Because I want you to succeed. So let's have a sort of brainstorm. Reminders on the phone. Plan ahead. What does that mean, plan ahead? Reminders on the phone. What would the reminder tell you? Like, be punctual. Yeah, you don't want to give yourself a bunch of fortune cookie slogans. There's something you can do that's really, really concrete. Let's say we have an exam or a test, right? So the test starts at 10 a.m. sharp and it ends at 1 p.m. because I'm going to use for the test the entire 3 hours. If the file is due at 1 p.m., when should you upload the PDF file? I've got a couple proposals here, right? I'm going to go with 10:30, right? 10:30 or earlier. As early as possible is an interesting suggestion, but that's probably a problem. Like, here's the thing. If you finish too early, so Dale, that's a great suggestion, but here's the thing from my experience. Students who finish really early, there's two possibilities for that. Chances are you don't know what the hell you're doing and you're just flopped. It's horrible. Or you did well, but I'd rather you use the time to prove yourself. So as early as possible, that's probably not a good suggestion. 12:45, that's a little close for my taste. Here's what I think would be, and I was talking about this with my partner. Here's what you should do. Find your nearest McDonald's. This was her suggestion because she's like, there's McDonald's everywhere. McDonald's has free Wi-Fi. Find your nearest McDonald's and calculate how long it takes for you to run over to your nearest McDonald's in case the worst happens, like your internet completely collapses, like things explode in your face, right? And now you need to sort of upload it. How long would it take you to run to your nearest McDonald's and then work that back from 1 a.m., 1 p.m.? I think 12:30 is probably like 30 minutes gives you enough time, right? And so that way, if you've got the file, right, you can turn it in. So I say 12:30, right? And what that means is treat that as the real deadline, and then you've given yourself 30 minutes to account for the unpredictable, because you can't predict the unpredictable, but you can predict that there's the unpredictable, right? So that's the only thing you can do is set yourself a time way before, like at least 30 minutes before, and treat it as a hard deadline. And then that way, if everything works out well, then everything works out well. And if things don't work out well, you've given yourself time to sort of manage the crisis. Either way, I still don't want a sad story in my inbox. I won't accept your work because I'm holding everyone to the same standard. I'm not going to play favorites. Okay? Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. I'm giving you advice. And that advice, by the way, is going to be good for other courses as well, or the workplace. Right? Sahil says, there's no attendance or partition marks. Watching the video in class should be equivalent to attending in person. That's absolutely wrong, because if no one shows up, who am I talking to? I'm going to be talking to the screen, and moreover, you can't ask a question to the screen. So, Sahil, it's a synchronous class. If you treat it as an asynchronous class, I strongly recommend you drop. It's a strong predictor of failure, like a numerical failure, like it will fail the class. So, Sahil, does that answer your question? Like, I'm here, right? Like, holy cow, like, of course it's not the same. I'm here. I answered your question now, right? James asked a good question. I'll check in with Sahil to make sure that's clear, and that's a good answer, but we'll check it. No, there are no participation independent marks, no. No, Sahil, there's none. So I've said that. No, so you show up because you're an adult, and it's beneficial. You see the value in what I'm doing and what we're doing together. That's it. That's it. Yeah, no worries. It's KPU. The U stands for university. It's not KPK. It's not KPQ. Quantum Polytechnic Kindergarten, right? It's like, so, the real world. And so James asked a great question. Are we allowed to update the submission multiple times before the deadline? No, which is one of the reasons you want to sit on that stuff, and make sure you proof it, because this is it. There's only one time. You press that button, it's up there. And then if afterwards you go, damn, I spotted a mistake, and you want to go back and check and fix it, you can't. So do be smart. Right? Give yourself enough time to proof. And this goes again for everything in life, right? If you've got a project that's due in the professional world, you have a job, leave yourself enough time to proof, to seek feedback from your peers. Well, this would be cheating in this context, but in real world, that's fine for certain things. And then to make sure you're on time, and that's good for your branding. You want to be punctual, right? Because if you don't work well and work hard, someone else will take your place, right? Because there's lots of hungry people out there who want to earn a living. James, does that answer your question? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Cool. So no multiple uploads. And you'll notice when you get to these exams, the instructions will be ultra clear. Like, I'm going to spell all of this out, right? We had a question earlier about English. No, it's not an English class. However, you do need to understand some English, because you will have to read some English. So here I say that when converting ordinary language arguments into strings of symbols, which is what we're learning to do this month, we will need to draw on everyday intuitions about what expressions mean. Hence, in this course, a minimum mastery of English grammar and idioms is required and expected. If English is your second or third language, and by the way, English is not my first language, so we're in good company, or if you have serious gaps in your reading and writing skills, it might be wise to address those lacunas either before or in tandem with the course. There's various resources for student success listed in this document. The instructor cannot be expected to teach English in addition to logic, so I can only do so much during this semester, right? So you do need some basics of that, but nothing fancy, luckily, right? Email etiquette. All right, so I say here, while I'm happy to answer focused questions, I do not teach or give grades by email. Also, under no circumstances will any work be accepted by email. Now, it's like, how many times do I have to say this? Because I don't want anyone sending me work by email. If you were late, I'm not accepting it. It's just going to go in straight into my recycling bin. And then if you email me with a follow-up, say, Professor, did you receive my email? I'm going to put that in the recycling bin as well, because I'm not accepting work by email, right? Even if it's on time. There's spots on Moodle for uploading your exams and quizzes, and that's what we're going to be doing. However, email is still a thing. I got no problem with it. So if you have to write me a message, send your message from your KPU email account. Give your message an informative title. Look, I teach many courses. I got hundreds of students. So mention the course. Say it's logic. I love you, but I might not remember who you are, frankly. Be polite. Begin with Dear Professor Champagne, and end with sincerely and put your name. And then finally break your message into paragraphs, skipping a new line whenever you change topic, and include your full name and university ID. That way, if I'm confused, I can always trace back who you are because I want to help you, right? And I need to be able to say, hey, prof, it's me, Bob. What about that thing we did? And then you just send that. That's like, no, not acceptable, right? So you're not just texting a pal, you're emailing a professor, and I'm busy and I want to help you, but you got to follow this etiquette. And this is not just for this class, by the way. Just treat all your emails in university that way. And when waiting for my reply, assume a delay of 2 working days. I check my messages only once a day, and usually in the afternoon, and never right before class because that's just too toxic. I don't want the negativity. And please don't send any follow-ups. Is that clear for emails? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. If you do have a question about logic, when do we ask it? If it's not by email, when's the best time to ask a question? During class, that's right. And I'll always make opportunities for you to ask those questions, right? So we'll practice a lot together, so don't worry. There'll be plenty of opportunities. In this main document, I put a lot of other stuff. What happens if you cheat? Cheating policy, very long. What happens in a nutshell if you cheat? Folks who've taken the class with me, what happens? I wish. You're expelled. Not only do you get 0, I'm going to do everything I can to get you expelled from university. It's going to be the worst decision you've ever made. You don't want me as an enemy. Trust me. Because all of the energy that you see me doing positively teaching you right now, I can put that same energy to making sure I get you expelled. Do not cheat. And I can find out, by the way. I won't tell you all my tricks, but I got all sorts of tricks to find out. And I have done it, like, unfortunately, too many times, right? Gotten people expelled. Don't do it. Bunch of other stuff on there. Have a look. Here's our week-by-week breakdown. So often I'll start the class by having a look. So notice here, the way I've broken it down is, again, in three chunks, right? So first month, second month, third month. Here's the first month. This is where we're going to be learning symbolization. We're going to start really right away. Like, it's a lot of homework to do this week. And in 2 weeks already, you're going to have a test, right? So on January 23rd, you got to know your stuff enough. So like literally today, you got to get started. Over here in black are the homework you need to do, right? And there's a bunch of other stuff you need to do. Stay focused and do everything you need for that, everything you got to do for that particular role, right? So this week, do everything that I'm asking you to do. You can't sit on it and wait another week and like you'll fall behind. Right? So that's the first month. We're going to learn symbolization. The second month, we're going to learn truth tables, and you'll notice here what we're going to be doing. And then we're moving on. Next page. I'm going to have a quiz. This is to sort of prepare you for the test because the test is going to be pretty arduous, going to be hard. And so I want you to feel whether or not you're lost or you got this. And if you're lost, I want to find out so it doesn't hurt too much. Right? 10%. If you're going to have a wake-up call, I'd rather you have a wake-up call that doesn't cost you too much. And notice here I've scheduled a lot of prep, right? So post-quiz review and pre-test prep. These are practice sessions. We're going to meet together. We're going to practice on the actual homework, and I'm going to bring your game up. And there's a reading break here, so there's no class. Notice what we do. It's a reading break. It's not a drinking break, so you got to practice. It's still university time, right? So there's stuff you need to do, and then we're going to have the test. I'll never let you go in the test unprepared. So if you've done everything I ask you to do, you will do well. If you haven't, you won't. Finally, our third month, derivations, and this one I've allocated more weeks to it. And notice I've also put here a mock quiz. So I'm going to pretend there's a quiz, but it's going to be worth 0% just to see where you folks are at and just to get your adrenaline pumping a little bit. And then there's one that's going to be worth 10% and one that's going to be worth 10% because I've noticed from experience that this is a tough skill and you'll have homework, second derivation homework, third derivation. You got to stick with it. And then there's going to be a workout session on April 3rd. And then it's the big showdown for the final exam. That's on, and there's Easter Monday, we skip that. And on April 17th. I notice here I say the exam will start at 8:30 a.m. That's not our normal start time, so you go to bed earlier, you rid your morning of distractions, you put yourself in the right mindset because this is 3 hours where you need to shine. Is our week-by-week breakdown clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. We're nearing the end of this part of the class. I'm looking at the clock. We're doing terrific. All right, I'm going to end with a disclaimer here at the bottom, or a piece of advice, right? This is really crucial. Repeated practice is essential to success in logic. If you just look at the screen passively as if this was YouTube, then you will fail, even if you indulge in that laid-back approach only once. Indeed, falling behind by 1 week can derail your whole term. So do all the homework that you're supposed to do the week that you're supposed to do it, and never miss a class. To form a realistic picture, averages in philosophy courses tend to hover around 68%. Logic is even harder. I grade your answers, not your life, so do not give me sad stories or expect second chances. This course has been carefully engineered to maximize student success. Trust me, I love this course and I love you. I've done everything I can to make it as easy as it can conceivably be. But if you're lost, confused, or unsure about something, ask for help beforehand, since after that, nothing can be done, right? So there's a moment when I'm grading you, and there's a moment when you've already been graded, right? This is the moment before, this is when you have your exam, and this is the moment after, right? Over here, there's lots that we can do before, right, on this timeline. After, there's nothing that we can do. So ask me for help beforehand, since after that, nothing can be done. This is a unique opportunity to exercise your brain and grow, so make the most of it if you put in the work, which I can't do for you. It's homework, right? I promise that I will do my utmost to help you perform at your best. So we're having a deal, folks, all right? You and me, and that's us, right? So this sort of this Euler diagram, right? Over here, there's you, there's me, and there's a space where we meet. You put in your end of the bargain, I'll put in my end of the bargain, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you succeed. Right? I guarantee you I'm not dropping the end of my bargain, that's for sure. And finally, taking this course means that you're aware of and agree with all the terms and policies stated in this document. It's a lease. You're basically signing it if you keep going. My friends, I had said that we would spend time on this. We did. Are there any further questions? If everything is clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, please ask your question. Good. I'm glad that's helpful. And I really do want to spend some time doing this at the beginning, because I'd rather we sort of have a clear picture, right? Good. All right, so what the hell is formal logic? Let's get started. Let's transition now. What is formal logic? I'm not assuming you know what it is, so let's do that first. Then I'll try to scare you a little bit, see if you want to stick with it or you want to drop the course. Formal logic. Formal logic is a genus with two species. So you can imagine you can subdivide logic into informal logic and formal logic, right? So kind of like if you say, for instance, there's living things, well, you can divide that into plants, animals, and insects, or whatever, right? We can subdivide logic into two subspecies, right? Informal logic and formal logic. Let's have a look at informal logic first, right? Informal logic is the sort of reasoning that you're able to do already. So you don't need specific training in that. You are all, I'm happy to report, informal logicians. So informal logic is a form of reasoning that happens in normal language. Here's a piece of reasoning that's taking place in normal language. If Tom and Jerry get on the boat, then the boat will sink. Tom gets on the boat, Jerry gets on the boat, therefore what? Complete that sentence. Therefore, the boat sinks. The boat will sink. You got it, right? Notice in the chat bar, everyone anticipated what's the part in bold right now, right? Everyone was able to write this in advance of my showing you that slide. Why is that? Because you're all capable of drawing inferences, that is, figuring out which ideas are sort of, implied by other ideas. And you can tease out those consequences and those logical conclusions on your own. You've done that your whole life by now. That's great. And it's happening in normal English. And this is the kind of normal English that we'll be using. Nothing fancy. All right. But there's a problem, though. Let's try a larger specimen. If I take his pawn, then either he will take my knight or he will move his bishop. If he takes my knight, then I will be angry, but his queen will be exposed. If he moves his bishop, then my queen will be exposed. That said, if I don't take his pawn, then my queen will be exposed anyway. Now, at the very least, I'm going to take his pawn or I'm not going to take it. Therefore what? Type in the completion of that sentence in your chat bar. Mm-hmm. Well, we've got there's a bit of a difference happening now, right? Let's see what people are writing. My queen will be exposed and take division. So there's a couple of things to notice. You can stop typing now. There's a couple of things to notice. One, far fewer people responded than the previous one. Second of all, it took much longer. And importantly, there's different proposals here, right? Lots of people are saying different things. And so when you get to arguments, and this is called an argument, right? When you get to an argument that's fairly large, our minds start to fail us. Informal logic is fine for small arguments. So if you're looking at an argument like this, informal logic is fine. You do just fine. There's no reason to swap that method for something else. But when you get to something that's a little more complicated, it's not clear. So for each, first of all, we'd have to figure out of all the different proposals that are written in the chat right now, which one would be correct. And moreover, like, if it's not correct, or if it is correct, how do we demonstrate that? How would we prove, right, that if someone says, because you can say whatever you want, right? Talk is cheap, right? How do we back that up? How do we prove it, right? And so this is the problem when we get to arguments that are long. So let's say, imagine I said, either his queen or mine will be exposed, right? How do we prove that? Let's say I say that's the correct conclusion to draw. Either his queen or mine will be exposed. And I'm looking here and I don't know that anyone said that. Well, how do we prove this? And this is where formal logic comes in, because informal logic is not that strong. It quickly leaves us puzzled, right? We're animals. There's limits to what our brains can fathom, right? And so for psychological and cognitive science reasons, we very quickly encounter passages of text and arguments that are out of our cognitive range. And this is why you need formal logic. Formal logic is going to be now giving you the ability to actually figure out the difficult question that I just asked you. Formal logic is going to do this. Look at all of this passage once again, right? If I take his pawn, then he will either take my knight or he will move his bishop. Let's just take the expression, take his pawn. I take his pawn. Notice that this shows up again, right? I take his pawn. I'm going to take his pawn, right? This same claim that I might take his pawn, I'll take his pawn, I'm not going to take his pawn, it could be that I'll take his pawn. All that stuff keeps showing up. We could say, well, look, let's just replace that with a symbol, let's say P, right, for taking his pawn. And then you start looking at all of the different propositions that recur into the passage, and you want to just track their structure. And what you're left with when you've cataloged all of these different propositions, right, and replace them with letters, is something that allows you to see the structure of the argument. And that structure can be identical no matter what the actual argument is. So notice this are the argument here. Same structure. So I see if P, then either K or B, right? But look at this argument. If I sign the petition, then either the events will keep happening or the burden of proof will fall on the other party. If the events keep happening, then attempts will be made to rectify things, but quotas will be implemented. If the burden of proof falls on the other party, then elections will be triggered. That said, if I don't sign the petition, then elections will be triggered anyway. Now, at the very least, I'm signing the petition or I'm not signing the petition. Therefore, either quotas will be implemented or elections will be triggered. And notice here, has nothing to do with chess. The argument is structurally identical to quite another number of different arguments that could realize that structure, right? And what formal logic does is it drops all of the particulars, right? So here P stood for I sign the petition, right? So that's what the P stood for P for petition. And here it stands for I take his pawn. Just drop that, right? And focus only on how these different propositions are related. Focus only on the form, not the matter. And so formal logic allows us to sort of see this particular structure now. Essentially, this is the structure of the argument. If P, then either K or B. If K, then A and Q. If B, then E. If not P, then E. P or not P, therefore, either Q or E. And formal logic is going to be the way to study the structure such that we can prove whether or not this conclusion actually follows from the reasons that were given. Remember when I began with my mission statement for our course, I said, in order to justify what we say, we have to provide reasons, but for those reasons to actually offer support for what we say, they have to be structured in just the right way. And what we want to do in this class is we want to answer this question. does this conclusion actually follow from the reasons that were given in support of it? And formal logic is going to be the way for us to figure that out. And interestingly, that structure stays the same no matter how it happens to find itself. So you could replace these letters if they spook you and they feel a little bit too much like algebra. You could replace them with whatever, and the structure would be the same. If heart, then either diamond or spade. If spade, then reverse triangle and cloverleaf, and so on and so on. The structure is identical, and we want to figure out, is this a good or a bad argument? And that's going to allow us a really cool skill that's going to allow us to expand beyond the limitations of what we earlier had when we were kind of scratching our heads like a monkey because we couldn't figure it out. That's where the form is in formal logic. We're concerned with the form of the argument, not its matter. My friends, is that clear? Or if you have a question, if everything is clear, type in clear. And if you have a question, ask your question. We're going to be concerned with the form of the arguments only. Good. That said, remember I told you that we begin as informal logicians, so I'm going to start with language and we'll gradually get there. Jaspreet says, is there only ever two final choices? Jaspreet, like you're asking, is this the only possible conclusion that you could draw, Jaspreet? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, there could be other conclusions, in which case we want to figure out if you propose an alternative conclusion, is that also as well, right? So, and Samuel here is trying to sort of figure out by squinting what it would be. And what we're going to do is, Samuel, we're going to change that squint and those intuitions into something robust, right? So over the next few weeks, because you get an inkling that maybe I could be able to draw this conclusion or that conclusion. Same thing for Jaspreet. We're going to learn tools that are going to allow you to demonstrably say, you could draw the following conclusions and not these ones, right? Because there's multiple conclusions you can draw, right? So one of them that you can draw, for instance, is this conclusion. You could just go ahead and repeat that conclusion over here, right? Clearly would follow from the reason that we're given, right? So yeah, and Avneet, imagine, let's go, Avneet says, reverse triangle can also be in the result. Let's say that's right, prove it. Because right now, Avneet, what did you consult to say what you said? Like your gut? You have a gut instinct, right? How the hell do you back that up? Do you see that, Avneet? So what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you how to prove that. If you're right, and you may be wrong, and you might be right, we're going to figure out if you're right and you're wrong and how to prove it. Avneet, does that sound cool? Does that sound like a cool trick? Cool. All right. Well, that's the thing, right? We are all informal logicians, and the range of our informal abilities will vary from one individual to the next, but invariably you all hit a wall eventually. Right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to learn a method that gets beyond all of those walls. No matter the size of the argument, the skills you're going to learn in this class will allow you to figure out the structure of the argument and figure out whether it's a good or a bad argument. So here we go for a spooky preview. Is everyone ready for the spooky preview? If you're ready, type in ready. Let's check in with everyone. I want to scare you a little bit. So you see how it's going to be cool. We're going to learn some skills, but here's what it's going to look like. Primed and ready. We're good. Let's do this. Here's our spooky preview. In a few weeks, this is going to be a question in an exam. That's going to be the question. That's it. Full stop. That's the question in the test. Go. Get to work. And that's going to be your answer. And anything that differs from that by even a little bit gets 0. Are you spooked? Like there's one thing that's off. Let's say this says 8 here and you've written 9. You're screwed at 0. Yeah. It's a little daunting. Agreed. And I'm trying to scare you. So I'm glad I'm succeeding, right? Because between, the version of yourself right now and the version of yourself in a few weeks that's going to be able to do this, it's going to require lots of work, right? Kind of like if you're the Karate Kid and you want to do the pelican kick, it's going to require a lot of work, right? Here's another scary preview, right? This is going to be a question in an exam. This is going to be your answer. And anything that's one off by just a bit gets 0. Is that scary? That's literally what you're going to write. That's going to be your answer at the bottom. And moreover, this will mean something to you. Not only are you going to be able to do this, you'll know what this means. This will make sense to you, In 12 weeks from now, not only will you be able to go from this question to that answer, it'll mean something to you. You'll actually understand what the hell this is, right? I'm hoping you're scared. Now, that was the scary part. Here's the good part, right? This is you, right? But unlike this image, you're not alone, all right? I am here. You're going to be your sensei. We're going to do this together, right? You're not on your own. I'm not throwing you with the wolves. I will be there with you literally every step of the way, and you have to trust me, and trust is essential. If you do everything I tell you to do, in a few weeks, you'll be able to do all this stuff. By the end of the semester, you'll be able to do the spookiest stuff that I've showed you. You'll be able to do it, and you'll feel terrific, because that's growth, man. That's like, you'll know literally that, oh my God, I remember week 1, I didn't understand what this meant and I was scared. And now A, I understand what this means, and B, I can bloody do it, right? But the only way to do that, the price tag is going to be that you'll have to work with me and do everything I tell you to do. Yeah, it's going to be meaningful too. You'll see how it's relevant. Not only will this be something you're able to do, but it just won't be a parlor trick too. You'll understand how this is supremely useful. So here's a quick disclaimer. I'm not, although I teach logic, I'm not a logician per se. It's not my main thing. I'm a philosopher. Like, I'm interested in all sorts of other questions and I use logic to sort of further my investigation of those questions. But just to show you how relevant it is, I'm interested in the big questions. I'm just a philosopher. But logic is the tool that I use to make progress on those questions. So it's extremely relevant. It connects to your life in a very important way. And you'll see why. All right. So this is the cutoff point now, and you have a decision to make. Are you going to drop, or are you going to stick to the class? Type in drop if you want to drop it. Stick if you stick. But if you stick, we're sticking with it. If you drop, I respect that. Goodbye. It's been nice meeting you. We're sticking with it because you got to trust me. There's no turning back now. It's okay, we're sticking with it. All right, you've made the commitment. You want the challenge? That's a great challenge. And you're going to feel so good on the other side of this when you kick some serious butt. You'll be like, man, I feel good. I know this stuff. Let's do this. Let's bloody do this. And we're looking great as far as time. We're going to start right away. And remember, the price tag for that great feeling is going to be high. It takes a lot of personal responsibility to find meaning in your life. So you're going to have to pay that price tag. Right? Let's give it your all. I'm going to give it my all. Let's begin with something. Again, we're going to start with informal logic. Let's begin with something you can encounter in ordinary life. Let's say your friend texts you and says, hey, what's up? There's currently an elephant survey. Check it out. Right? This is a text message you could get from a friend. Let's have a closer look at this text message. This text message is interesting because there's different kinds of things happening. Language can do lots of different work. On the one hand, your friend says, hey, what's up? There's currently an elephant survey. Check it out. When your friend says, hey, what your friend is doing is they're making an exclamation. Right? Just saying, hey, and it ends with an exclamation mark, right? So that's the no-brainer. That's the telltale sign that a piece of language is an exclamation. That's terrific, but we're not going to be interested in that. Exclamations are not the kinds of things we're going to be interested in this class. But it is something you can do with language. What's up is going to be a question. And again, there's a little symbol here that lets us know what's going on. As far as language is concerned, we can ask questions. Again, that's wonderful. Part of what we do in informal logic, as I pointed out, is we reason with language. And language can do lots of things. It can do exclamations. We're not interested in that. And it can do questions. And we're also not going to be interested in that. So I just want to flag that. It's a possibility, but we're moving it to the side. There's currently an elephant in Surrey. This is doing different work from the previous ones. The previous one was basically, signaling an emotion. The one was a request. This one was a request for information. Here, something else is happening. There is currently an elephant in Surrey, is what we call a proposition. These are the things we're going to be interested in. Propositions, that's what we're going to be interested in as logicians. And finally, the text message ends with, check it out. Check it out is a command, right? It's like I say, do 10 push-ups, right? We're not going to be interested in that. So we're not going to be interested in commands. We're not going to be interested in questions. We're not going to be interested in exclamations. We're only going to be interested in propositions. And the reason for that is exclamations cannot be true or false. Questions cannot be true or false. And commands cannot be true or false. Exclamations can convey an emotion. That's great. Questions can be answered or unanswered, and answered correctly or answered incorrectly. But the question itself is neither true or false. And commands can be obeyed or disobeyed, but the command itself is neither true or false. Propositions are different. Propositions can be either true or false. This is what sort of distinguishes them, right? So we're going to be interested only in propositions in this course. So we're going to forget about all the other stuff. It's going to be fluff. We're going to trim it for whenever we see a passage. If we see things like that, we just trim that. We're not interested in that. And propositions that I've just mentioned are possibly true or false. They're grammatically complete sentences that can be true or false. So for instance, here's an example. Justin Trudeau weighs 89 kilograms. Like, I just made that up. But look, there's only two possibilities. Either he does weigh 89 kilograms or he doesn't, right? I'd have to go check in the world and weigh him, but I'm making a claim. It's a proposition. A proposition, like, think of the expression here, proposition. It's taking a position. It's saying the world is this way. In this case, the universe, a particular region of it called Justin Trudeau, weighs 89 kilograms. I'm taking a position now. I'm making a claim. So that's what a proposition is. Here's another proposition. There's an even number of stars in the galaxy. Now, it'd kind of be hard for me to weigh Justin Trudeau. I'd have to get past security, get his consent and whatever, but it's doable. Unlike the first proposition, this second proposition is not one I could ever be in a position to test. I can't count the number of stars in our galaxy. I doubt anyone will ever be in a position to test it. Nevertheless, even if we can't establish whether or not the claim or the proposition is true or false, and you can use claim and proposition interchangeably, they're synonyms, there's still a truth of the matter about it out there that would show that this proposition is either true or false. Like, whatever the number of stars in our galaxy is, it's a finite number. And that number, I have no clue what it is, but it either ends with like a 3 or a 2 or a 4 or a 6. And if it ends with something like a 6, then it's an even number. And if it ends with something like long number ends with 1, then it's an odd number, right? If it's an odd number, then the claim is false, because here it claims that it's an even number. And if it's an even number, it ends with a 2, let's say, right? Then the claim is true. And so this is a claim or a proposition, even if we don't have the ability to verify its truth or falsehood. Likewise, tomorrow someone in British Columbia will give birth to triplets. Well, here we can't verify now, but wait till tomorrow, right? We could verify then. But either way, we can know now, we don't have to wait for tomorrow, we can know right away that this is a proposition because it's a grammatically complete sentence. It starts with a capital letter and it ends with a period, right? That can be either true or false. And we can know that immediately that it's a proposition. Whether or not it's true or false, that's a question of testing and verification. And you can imagine that would be for someone else to do. But in this logic class, all we need to know is, yeah, that's a proposition. And that's good. That's the sort of thing we're interested in. Likewise for there's currently an elephant in Surrey. That's either true or it's false. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But we can know right away without checking that this is a proposition because it's saying something that could be true, could be false, right? Can be true, can be false, grammatically complete. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. So the reason why, this is going to be our basic building blocks. I'm glad everything's clear. These are going to be our basic building blocks in this class, right? And I want us to make a distinction between two ways in which these claims or propositions could be related. On the one hand, you can think of relations between units of knowledge and the world. This would be the axis of correspondence. So you can imagine earlier when I talked about Justin Trudeau weighing, what did I say, 89 kilos, right? It's trying to connect with presumably a fact in the world, which is Justin Trudeau's weight. So here's Justin, right? And let's imagine that Justin Trudeau weighs, let's give him a nice round number. He's beefed up, he's 100 kilos, right? It's relating to a situation in the world. And in this case, if Justin Trudeau weighs 100 kilos and my claim was that he weighs 89, would my proposition be true or false? If Justin weighs 100 kilo, would my earlier proposition be true or false? Yeah, it'd be false, right? It'd be false. I'd have to claim that he's 100 kilos, and if I claim he's 101, it would be false as well, right? If I claim anything other than 100, if that's what in point of fact what he weighs, and in order to figure out what Justin weighs, you got to go out and you got to check, right? It's a relation of correspondence with the world. So you can think of this axis, this arrow here, as an axis of correspondence. But there's also, you can imagine, an axis of coherence between the different units of knowledge. You have these blocks over here, and they also entertain not just relations with the world, so let's make a big fat W, that's the world. Not only do these individual propositions bear relations to the world, but they also bear relations with one another. propositions can be related to propositions. So let me say that again slowly. Propositions, imagine that's the basic building block, can be related to the world. That's correspondence. But also, propositions, those are the basic building blocks, can be related to one another. And that would be coherence. So there's coherence and there's correspondence. And the reason why I'm introducing that distinction is that we're not going to be interested in correspondence in logic. So in this course, we don't care about the axis of correspondence. We only care about the axis of coherence. And you might think of logic as the science that studies the relations between units of knowledge. Natural scientists go and study how the world is. They figure out whether stuff is true or false. Journalists presumably, hopefully do that, right? We logicians, what we're going to do is we're going to tidy up, and look at that brain, right? It was disorderly a moment ago, and we're going to tidy it up and make it orderly and more rational and coherent, right? By tracking the different relations between the propositions that we make, right? So if you can imagine, let's go back to our text message. There was one proposition in our text message, and namely that there is currently an elephant in Surrey. Well, look, this sort of paints out its conditions for verification fairly easily. We know what Surrey is. It has a fairly clear boundary. So here's the outline of Surrey, right? You've got Boundary Bay somewhere and all, this would presumably be White Rock over here. So that's excluded from that. And you've got Surrey. Surrey is a thing. It's a piece of land. And to claim that there's an elephant in Surrey just is to say the world is this way as it's being depicted right now. There's an elephant in Surrey. We're not going to be interested in figuring out whether there's an elephant in Surrey. We're only going to be interested in figuring out how that claim could that proposition could relate to other propositions. So here I've put a do not cross border. You can imagine logic is the ultimate lockdown. So if we're in a pandemic lockdown, the ultimate lockdown discipline, because we're not concerned with going out into the world and checking. We're just going to see how these different units of knowledge relate to one another. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. So not only do you not have to buy a textbook, you also don't have to go around and to check stuff in the rain. You don't need a raincoat. You don't need rain boots. You don't need to go out into the world and check. It's going to be a dry science. You can do it just with your thoughts and your fingers and your screen. It's going to be very easy. Well, not easy, but a different kind of hard. Right? So you can imagine a division of labor. Logic is over here. Science is over here. We're not doing science. We're doing logic. All right? So what can we say? So this is the thing now. So okay, what could that possibly look like? And Edric asks, is coherence more to theorize while correspondence is for practical? Yeah, but there's also practical value in checking for coherence. So practicality, I think, would also, there's something to be said for cleaning up that brain and making it orderly. There's a practical value to that. So definitely depends on your needs. But sometimes you want to check whether Justin weighs, 89 kilos. But sometimes you just want to check whether or not, your thoughts are logical and coherent with one another. And that has practical value. Edric, does that answer that question? Cool. Let's have a look now, because you might be wondering, well, if we're not going to go out, right, and we're not going to investigate the world, what is it that we can possibly do? So let's begin to see what we could do in logic without actually stepping outside. Can everyone see a Word file right now? It should say, there is currently an elephant in Surrey. If you can see that, type in yes. Good. I'm going to select a word in that, just to make sure that you can see my cursor as well. What word am I selecting right now? Awesome. All right. So I'm often going to switch back and forth because I need something to work with. The Word files are they give me things they allow me to do things I can't do with the other files. So this is our proposition once again, right? There's currently an elephant in Surrey. Now, what we're going to do, just in the same manner that I showed you earlier, we're going to replace this entire proposition by just a symbol, because it's kind of long to write out. And as you noticed when we had that earlier argument about chess or a petition or whatever, these things are going to get repeated often. And it's going to be really tedious to repeat them all the time. So just so we have a smaller sign to manipulate, we'll replace it with, let's say, E. Why E? Well, elephant, right? Starts with an E. There's currently an elephant in survey. So we'll replace this proposition over here with this E. So the E stands for the whole proposition. Now, I have no clue if there's an elephant in survey right now. My guess is there's none, but that's just a guess. How the hell do I know? You'd have to go check. Not only do you need to go check to show that there is an elephant in survey, you'd also have to go check to confirm that there isn't an elephant in survey. But right now, sitting comfortably in my armchair, I can tell that there's only two possibilities. Either there is an elephant in survey, in which case this proposition is true, or there isn't an elephant in survey, in which case this proposition is false. So the proposition, there is currently an elephant in survey, we'll say that it has two possible truth values. It's either true or it's false. And notice here, I'm introducing some technical jargon. I've got a file that will summarize all that jargon, but throughout the semester, we're going to learn technical terms. Truth and falsehood in this class and in logic in general are called truth values. And there are two truth values, true and false. So sitting here comfortably, I can know that this is a proposition. It's not an exclamation. It's not a question. It's not a command. And because it's a proposition, I know that it admits of two possible truth values, true or false. If I wanted to figure out which world we live in, a world in which it's true or a world in which it's false, I'd have to assign someone to go out there, put on their rain boots, and go check exhaustively the entire surface of Surrey. And if they find at least one elephant in that area, then it was true. And if they scoured that entire area and they haven't found an elephant, then the claim is false. So far, so good. If everything is clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. And I'm taking baby steps. So far, I'm hoping you're like, this is easy. Good, because it's going to get hard real quick. Anako says, what if the veracity of the proposition is subjective like a value judgment? Well, that's a different story, right? Now we're in a question of whether or not the testing is difficult to obtain. But still, look, Anako, you can't see what I'm thinking right now. But let's say I tell you the following. Let's say I'm going to say this, right? All right, try again. Can you hear me? Yes, we're back to yes. All right, cool. All right, Anako. Anako, did that make sense? Luckily, we don't have to answer that whole question because we're not concerned with correspondence. Is that cool? That's why I just want to check in with Anako. Like, we don't care, right? How do we figure out whether or not Mark's thinking of eggs? Well, that's a question of correspondence, and it's an interesting question, but it's not one we're concerned with, right? Yeah. Anako, let me give you a quick sense of how we're going to be, what we're going to be doing if we're going to be doing coherence, right? Like, imagine, for instance, imagine I say this, right? I am currently thinking of eggs. You can't tell whether or not that's true, right? Whenever I think of eggs, I fart. Therefore what? So I'm currently thinking of eggs. Whenever I think of eggs, I fart. Therefore, I fart. That's right. Eggs make me fart. I fart, right? Eggs make me fart would be kind of saying the second proposition here again, right? So it's I'm farting, right? Therefore, I fart. And now here's the interesting question, right? Let me just kind of remove that for just a second. I'm currently thinking of eggs. Whether or not that's true or false, you can't tell, but don't know, don't care. Could be true, could be false. Whenever I think of eggs, I fart. That could also be true or could be false, right? What the hell, right? I'm just making stuff up. Maybe it's true. When I do think of eggs, I fart, right? But maybe it's false as well, right? But what we can figure out is whether or not the conclusion follows from those reasons, independently of whether or not we can assess their truth or falsehood. You are able, all of you, to figure out the conclusion, I fart, irrespective of the fact that you can't tell whether or not I'm thinking of eggs, and none of you can tell whether it's true that when I think of eggs, I fart. You can all figure that out. My friends, was that helpful? If that's helpful, type in yes. If it wasn't, type in no. I'm hoping you're all going to say yes. Cool. So correspondence, what I mean by correspondence, right? Not coherence. We can't check the coherence, the correspondence of any of these claims. None of the correspondence that was established. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter. All right, so here's another situation. Imagine I make the following proposition. There is currently an elephant in Surrey and it's raining in Winnipeg. Notice that what I've got selected here is a proposition. Why is it a proposition? Well, it's a grammatically complete sentence. It starts with a capital letter and it ends with the period. And it's making a claim. It's saying something. It's taking a position. It's describing the world. It's saying that there's currently an elephant in Surrey. And moreover, it's adding to that, saying, and it's raining in Winnipeg. So this whole thing is a proposition. It's what we call a compound proposition. Why is it compound? Because it's kind of made up of two, what we call atomic propositions. So let me just type in these things, right? Atomic propositions and compound propositions. Atomic propositions are the smallest units that are liable of being true or false. So it is raining in Winnipeg. That's an atomic proposition. So let me color code it, right? You can imagine that's an atomic proposition. There is currently an elephant in Surrey. That's also an atomic proposition. A compound proposition, again, let me color code this in purple. The compound proposition would be the whole damn thing, right? Because it's now joining together two things. It's a compound. So think of atoms and chemical compounds, kind of the same idea. An atom, by the way, just means not choppable. So a is the privative, this cannot, and tomic comes from tomos, from the Greek cut, something that cannot be cut further. So an atom in physics is the same thing. It's the smallest unit of matter that can be cut further, right? And here it is raining in Winnipeg. That's an atomic proposition because it can't be cut further. Like, can you imagine if I cut it like this? In Winnipeg, true or false, right? It's like, well, all of a sudden the properties of truth and falsehood have vanished because I cut it too much, right? So you need, in order for having a proposition, you need a minimum amount of complexity, right? I won't go into that. If you do philosophy of language with me, this would be the subject predicate structure, right? But it's the smallest unit possible. So here we have, there's currently an elephant in Surrey and it's raining in Winnipeg. It's a different proposition than the one we had earlier because it is compound. So what we're going to do is, when we're going to symbolize it, so here we are, right? Unlike earlier, right? Igno writes, so the whole sentence is not atomic because it can be cut. Yeah, that's right. The whole, and we would say not sentence, but proposition. The whole proposition is compound, right? The whole proposition is compound. So the word whole here is very, you got to be careful with that word. The whole thing is not atomic because it can be cut. And here we go. I'm going to cut it. Ignore it. It's a great question. Let me cut it. Notice how both parts make sense on their own. There is currently an elephant in Surrey. That made sense. It is raining in Winnipeg. That made sense. I can carve it. Kind of like when you're chopping up an animal and you can carve at the joints with your knife, right? You can go through the joint, right? So you can carve this at its joints into two constituent atomic propositions. Ignore, does that make sense? Great observation. Good stuff. So what we're going to do now, because it's a compound proposition, we're going to reduce it now. We're going to symbolize it with different symbols. So we're going to say here, there is currently an elephant in Surrey. Well, earlier we adopted the word E to stand for the entire atomic proposition. Now we're learning that it not only was it a proposition, it was an atomic proposition, because that distinction now is now useful for us. And we're going to say it is raining in Winnipeg. We're going to call that R. So let me just color code this. Let's give this, and again, you could use whichever colors, but I'm just going to use colors for pedagogical reasons. We're not going to be using colors in this class, but when I teach, I feel like it's kind of neat, right? So there you have it. So here you have a compound proposition that is made up of an atomic proposition and another atomic proposition. And the thing that connects them is going to be called a connective. And the connective in this case is and. So let me write these words down, right? So I said the word connective. That's the thing that's going to connect them. And the and is going to be called a conjunction. Conjunction. So the technical name for the connective and is the conjunction. So far, so good for the jargon. We have compound proposition, atomic proposition, connective, and specifically here, conjunction as one of the connectives. If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. We're learning language here. Check in with everyone. I don't want to lose anyone. We're doing terrific. Awesome. Now notice here, I've put 4 rows because earlier what I was doing was I was cataloging the possibilities. Well, not this. Let me just backtrack here. Earlier, well, here, let's just take one atomic proposition. I am currently thinking of eggs. And as we saw with Anako's great question, there's 2 possibilities. And even if we're in no position to verify it, either I am or I'm not thinking of eggs. Actually, right now I kind of am. But hey, only I can tell. And so we have 2 possibilities, right? Either I am or I'm not. When we have a compound proposition like this, right? A compound proposition united by a connective, in this case, the connective is a conjunction, we're going to end up with 4 possibilities. One of the possibilities is that there's currently an elephant in Surrey. So let's imagine one of the possibilities is that it's true that there's currently an elephant in Surrey. And it could also be true that it's raining in Winnipeg. And again, these things, fortunately for us, would be fairly easy to check. But also, fortunately for us, we don't have to check. So there's this possibility here that it's true. And it's possible also that it is raining in Winnipeg. And if both of these things are true, namely that there's currently an elephant in Surrey and it's raining in Winnipeg, and imagine someone texted you that, then what they're telling you is the truth. The whole thing is true because that's what they've claimed. That's the proposition they've made. They've taken a position. And now this is a position in the world that's more involved. There's a region of the world that's this way and there's another region of the world that's this way. And the whole thing would be true. So far, so good, everyone. I'm going to put the T in the center for the whole compound proposition. If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. And notice the conventions here, because we're going to stick with them throughout the entire month, and in fact, throughout the entire next month. I'm putting the truth values, and that's also a technical expression that we've learned, truth values, namely truth and falsehood. I'm putting them underneath, right? These are my symbols standing for atomic propositions. This is my connective. Now, there's different ways the world can be, and we're in no position to check which world we live in. We could live in this world, but we could also live in another world, a world in which it is true that there's an elephant in Surrey, but then it's not raining in Winnipeg. Let's say it's perfectly sunny right now in Winnipeg. If it's true that there's an elephant in Surrey, but it's false that it's raining in Winnipeg, what about this entire compound proposition? Is the person telling you a truth or a falsehood when they're telling you the whole? Are they saying a truth or are they saying a falsehood? That's correct. You're absolutely right. They're saying a falsehood, right? Because it only requires that one of them be false. They're saying the whole thing. They're committing themselves to the entire compound proposition, right? And so the proposition as a whole would come out false, even though, right, one of its sides here would be true. I'm going to introduce another terminology, right? We know that the connective is called conjunction. On either side of a conjunction, what you're going to have are conjuncts. Conjuncts. So you have one conjunct here, and you have another conjunct here. So, for instance, Edric's comment could be refined as saying the entire conjunction would be true, even though one of its conjuncts would be false. That's the technical expression we're going to use for the either side of the and, whatever's on either side, right? Conjunction has conjuncts. So what we want to do now is we want to try to catalog, because we're logicians, we are the perfect lockdown science, right? We don't actually ever leave our home. Perfect online course as well. There's another possibility. What's another possibility? Earlier we saw a possibility where it's the first conjunct is true and the second conjunct is false. What else could we have as a possibility? One of the possibilities is all are false. That's right. We could also say that all are false. So one of the possibilities is that both conjuncts are false, right? Let's imagine a situation where both conjuncts are false. Look, it's double whammy, right? There's no elephant in Surrey, and it's not raining in Winnipeg. If this were the case, right? If we were in a world where both conjuncts would be false, the entire proposition, would it be false or would it be true? The entire thing. The bottom row here, what should we put in here? We put an F, yeah, put an F for false, right? And we're missing another one, and I think folks have pointed that out. There's another possibility, right? It could be that it's not true that there's an elephant in Surrey. It's false. There is no elephant in Surrey, but you know what? It's raining in Winnipeg, in which case, and Kamal and Avneet, I think I figured it out, the entire thing still, for the same reasons that this entire proposition came out as false, well, the same rationale applies the other direction, right? If one of the things that was said turns out to be false, then the entire thing is going to be false because it's claiming and. All of those things have to happen in order for the entire compound proposition to be true. So here what we have is the basic, what we call a truth table for the connective conjunction. What this does is it maps out four possible worlds. A world number one here, world one, world two, world 3, and world 4. Which world do we live in? World 1, world 2, world 3, or world 4? I don't know. What's your guess? I don't think we live in either world 1 or 2 because the elephant stuff sounds a little crazy to me. We're probably living in worlds 3 or 4, I think, right? I'm going to go for 3 or 4 probably. But, you know, do we agree that we're all just making shit up? Like, that's bullshit. Like, none of us have actually checked, right? None of us have actually done the hard work of actually verifying by correspondence whether there's an elephant in Surrey and actually verifying by correspondence whether it's raining in Winnipeg. So we have no clue, right? We have no clue which one of these worlds do we live in. No clue whatsoever. Really, we have a hunch, we have a guess, but we haven't really done the work, and we're not going to do the work. Don't know, don't care, right? As logicians, for us, this suffices. We're just going to catalog the possible combinations that could be out there without trying to figure out which of those possible combinations is actually the case, right? And this is going to be the truth table that lays out these different possibilities and the logical work that's being done by the word and. You all have the word and. In every language, there's the word and, right? But it does a certain logical work, and what we have is basically a representation of the logical work that it does. And moreover, because we also don't want to spend time typing out this stuff because it's going to trust me. Remember my spooky preview. So far, you're like, yeah, this is easy, right? Remember the spooky preview. I'm going to get you to a place that's going to be very complicated. So what we're going to do is, to make things manageable, we're going to replace this with a symbol, and this will be our symbol for conjunction. Again, because we're going to have to write this out over and over and over again, right? This will be the symbol that we're going to adopt for conjunction. So we have so far as a compound proposition. The compound proposition as a whole has 4 possible truth values, depending on the truth values of its different conjuncts. And we'll say, for instance, that this is the left-hand conjunct, and we'll say that this is the right-hand conjunct. So when we're talking to another, in order for us to understand each other, because this is going to get really technical, we'll use these expressions. So we'll say, Professor, what if the left-hand conjunct is and whatever, right? So we'll have that technical jargon for us to talk about. And could the truth value be different, and so on. And Avneet is getting ahead of us. That means we're on the right track. What if you said or instead? Well, Avneet, check it out. I anticipated. Avneet, did we collude? Were we in cahoots before? Did we discuss this beforehand? Look, Avneet knows exactly where this is going. What if we said or, right? What if instead of saying there's currently an elephant in Surrey, or it's raining in Winnipeg? Well, Kamal's right. First of all, this wouldn't be a conjunction anymore. This would be a disjunction. So the name for this compound proposition would be a disjunction, or is a disjunction. And we can know right away the possibilities out in the world remain the same. It's either going to be true and true, true or false, right? False or true, or false or false, right? These are the possibilities out there, right? And then Samuel writes, the only one proposition would be, well, hold on, Samuel. Don't get ahead. So folks are trying to use their intuitions to guess what we would put here, right? But it matters crucially that we understand what sort of word we're talking about here, what sort of connective we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and replace it right now with its symbol, just as I did earlier. And notice, you can't notice this, but I'm using shortcut keys, right? Which you're going to install. That's part of your homework. I can just type a shortcut key right now on my keyboard and it does it. It's a chevron, so this inverted V. Earlier, look at the shape of that chevron, right? Look at the shape, how different. This was a conjunction. This is a disjunction. And when we're going to be using disjunction in this class, we're going to be using a specific kind of disjunction. There's two kinds of disjunction. There's an inclusive disjunction. I need an S over here, right? Let me give myself a bit of space. And there's an exclusive disjunction. An exclusive disjunction would look like this. Here's an exclusive disjunction. You are either pregnant or, here's the or, you are not. Like, I hate to hate, that's an exclusive disjunction. Like, if you're pregnant, then you're pregnant. And if you're not pregnant, then you're not pregnant. And the or here is tracking an exclusive disjunction. You can't be both, right? But I can say an inclusive disjunction would be like this, right? You can put coffee, milk or cream, milk or sugar in, let me get my or, let me make it bold so we can see where it is, right? In your coffee, right? I don't know about you. You put milk, coffee, right? What's your coffee preference, people? Let's record the coffee preferences. I'm going to go for milk only. So just milk only. I'm going to type my preference. What's your preference? Let's get to know each other. Avneet's a milk only person. Liam's a milk and sugar. Isabel's a milk only person. Getting to know you. Tea is better. Getting to know you, that's cool. Milk to tea, right? That's right. I prefer tea. That's right. But like either way, right? Like imagine I have you over for tea even, right? And your drink. Here you go for tea lovers out there. Right? There you go. You can put milk or sugar. You can put both, right? You can put milk or sugar. Sure, go ahead, put milk or sugar, but you can put both. Both is fine on an inclusive disjunction, right? It allows both. You can't have both here. You can't have it both ways. Here you can have it both ways. So let me now summarize everything. An inclusive disjunction, you can have it both ways. An exclusive disjunction, you cannot have it both ways. So now we need to go back to our original compound proposition and clarify which sort of disjunction are we using. We're always in this class going to use the inclusive disjunction. So essentially what we mean when we say there is currently an elephant in Surrey or it is raining in Winnipeg, essentially what we mean is it is the case that at least, and then you keep on going, right? It is the case that at least one of the following is true, right? It is the case that at least one of these things is true. There's currently an elephant in Surrey, or it's raining in Winnipeg, and that is a kind of a reformulation of to pick out the inclusive sense of or. So given now that I've made more explicit that inclusivity by writing it out, it is the case that at least there is an elephant in Surrey, or it's raining in Winnipeg. What would the truth value be here? T or F? That's the correct answer. T. Why? T. You got the correct answer. Now the important question is Kyung. Why? Oui, Shamer. Pourquoi? Only one needs to be true. That's right. Right. Look at the proposition. It says at least, right? At least one of those things. It's the case that at least one of those things is going to be true. And well, look, there you go. This suffices that we've got the elephant, one and done. We can just call it true. Right? We don't even need to check Winnipeg anymore with this kind of claim. You've checked Surrey. You don't need to buy a plane ticket to go check Winnipeg. Right? What about this one? What would the compound proposition be? True or false? Yeah, totally. Totally true. Same idea. Doesn't matter. Right? What about this one? Same, true. Right? You can have overkill. It's like having your milk and your sugar. Right? Both are true. That's great. Right? It's like, imagine, for instance, I say at least one of the following things is going to, I say George St. Pierre will win the match. If you like MMA, right, you'll know what I'm referring to. Or he will, win under 30 seconds, right? So it's like, well, like maybe he didn't win under 30 seconds, but if what I said was that he will win, he won. It took him 2 minutes, but still it was fine, right? One of those things was true, so we're good to go, right? So it's the case that at least there's currently an elephant in Surrey. But what about this, though? It doesn't pan out. There's no elephant in Surrey. It's not raining in Winnipeg. Yeah, sorry, you lose the bet, right? You're saying a falsehood now. Sorry, the world is not the way you claimed it was. Right? The world is not the way you claimed it was. It turns out if we live in this world and both of the disjuncts, and we have a technical term for those as well, right? Earlier we talked about conjuncts, right? These are called disjuncts. Disjuncts. So we'll talk about the left-hand disjunct of the disjunction and the right-hand disjunct of the disjunction, and we'll talk about the entire disjunction over here. And now notice if we can contrast, right? TTTF, TFFF. They're doing different logical work. This little arrow, this little chevron here, which stands for and, does different logical work. I mean, the two columns on either side are the same. Those map out the possibilities that you might encounter in the world. The logical work is different. The truth table for either, if you juxtapose them, let me zoom out a little bit, not too much, right? Notice that they're different, right? TFFF, TTF, right? And you'll notice here that disjunction is far more permissive. There are more worlds in which it turns out true than there are worlds in which it turns out false, right? So you're making a stronger claim when you say and, right? So not only am I going to beat you up, but I'll beat you up in 30 seconds. That's a very strong boast, right? Because not only must I win, I must win under a very small amount of time. Whereas you say one or the other, it's like, it's fine. So far, so good, everyone. So far, so clear. If everything's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask a question. Baby steps. It's going to get hard, but baby steps. All right. So we said that, and Michael said, what makes it a disjunction? Well, the fact that we use a different word and that it does different logical work. Michael, does that answer it? Like the fact that it's the only difference between and or is that we use a different sign for it and it does different work in our inferences. It tracks different things. That's all it is. That's what a word is, right? It's a connective. It does certain logical work and they do different work. Like here's the hammer, here's a saw. What's the difference? Well, they do different functions. Yeah. Disjunction means or. That's exactly right, Michael. Yeah, that's our fancy word for or. Yeah. In fact, inclusive disjunction. Great question. All right, so let's have a look. I said there would be 5 connectives. We've got 2 down so far. We've got conjunction. We've got disjunction. Let's learn about another one. It is raining in Winnipeg is equivalent to saying that liquid water is dropping over Manitoba's capital city. By the way, raining just is liquid water dropping from the sky, and Winnipeg is Manitoba's capital city. But you might not know that, right? So what do we have now? There's a different kind of compound proposition. Again, it's a compound proposition, and it's making a claim. What is the claim? It's claiming that those two things are equivalent. That is, they're interchangeable. Well, let's say it's raining in Winnipeg. If it's true that it's raining in Winnipeg, it stands to reason that it's also true that liquid water is dropping over Manitoba's capital city, right? So to say that one is the case, then the other is the case, that means the whole thing is true. It is the same, right? And likewise, suppose it's not raining in Winnipeg, right? And liquid water is not dropping over Manitoba's capital city, then that would also mean that the claim to say that it's equivalent, because it's not claiming that it is raining and it's not claiming that water is falling, it's claiming that those two things are the same, then that entire proposition would be true, right? Kind of like if I say, here you go, Superman is in, what's a city that starts with R? Go for Regina, just because that's what occurred to my mind. Don't do any psychoanalytics on me for why that popped into my mind. Superman is in Regina, right? Clark Kent is in Regina, right? Can we ever have a situation where Superman is in Regina and Clark Kent is not in Regina? Yes or no? Could we ever have a situation like that? Yeah, Clark Kent is Superman, right? Yeah, so where Superman goes, Clark Kent follows, right? He is the same person, right? So, for instance, if I say Superman is in Regina is equivalent to Clark Kent is in Regina. So again, don't forget, this is a proposition. Is this, what I've had in orange right now, is it atomic or compound? Thing in orange, atomic or compound? It's atomic, that's right. And here I have another atomic proposition, and I'm essentially saying, right, Clark Kent is in, well, this is not D, so let's put Clark Kent, K, and S for Superman. So we can have fun. Because remember, formal logic, we're only concerned with the form, so I can change these at will, right? So Superman, S, is in Regina, and Clark Kent, K, is in Regina. These are atomic propositions. To say that they're equivalent just means that they're equivalent. Notice the word here. Equi means same. Valent is truth value. I talked about how these are truth values. Equi means same truth value. Well, have a look here. Are the truth values on either side same or different? They're different. So it's not equivalent. Right? So we would say that the entire proposition is false. It's not equivalent. It's not the same truth values, right? Likewise here, in world number 3, are these propositions, these atomic propositions, they have the same truth value, or the same or different in this situation? Different, right? There you go, different. So it would be false, right, under these conditions. So you can imagine, and this is an easy one, but let me give you an example where this could be useful, right? Playing video games is equivalent to saying that, or let's say Amrit plays video games is the same as saying that Amrit is violent. Right? Here's a situation where, imagine someone makes this claim. Now that claim can either be true or false. If you think it's true, what you're saying is that if Amit plays video games, and nothing in here lets you know whether Amit does or doesn't play video game, by the way. But if you think it's true, what that means is that you think that if Amit does play video games, and let's call this a V, we'll just underline this so we know, and let's call this, oh no, V and V. That's not good, V and V. VNV Nation. Games, there you go, and then V. How's that? Let's just change this. And again, we're not going to sort of underline these letters all the time, but just for the homework and for now, I think it's helpful, right? To say that this entire claim is true is to say that if one is the case, then the other is the case. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this claim is false. And what I mean by that is it ends up in these worlds. You know, it could be that Amrit plays video games, but he's not violent. Conversely, by the way, it could be that Amrit doesn't play video games and he's one violent mofo, like he goes around, beats everybody up, but he's never seen a PlayStation in his life. That would be world number 3. In world 3, Amrit doesn't play any video games, right? And he turns out to be super violent. If I were to establish that we are in world 3, I would thereby show that this entire proposition is false. I would have falsified that proposition. If you want to back it up and show that it's true, you'd have to show me that we live in world 1 or world 3, right? Good to have a lot of work on your hands, but that's the axis of correspondence. What we're concerned with is the logical work being done by that expression, and this is the logical work being done by that expression. Equivalent, same truth values. Is everything clear, or do you have any questions? If everything's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. We can see the logical work being done by it now. We can literally see it. It's in front of us. We map out exhaustively all the possible alternatives, and we can see the work that it does for us. We're going to replace this with a symbol. So I'm glad everyone's clear. If you remember, if you have a question, you go ahead and ask, unless it's kind of a trivial question that will veer us off course, right? Yeah, here's the fourth case. Let's look at the fourth case, right? Imagine, for instance, it is true. Let's imagine this. It's true. I'm going to put it in bold, all right? So, Grisha Ranjit, imagine it's true, and let's imagine we don't live in these worlds and we live here, right? We live in world number, let me put this gray. All right, let me grade this out. We live in world 4. So far, so good, Grisha Ranjit, and everybody else? Say yes if so far, so good. We live in world 4. Now, look at this entire compound proposition. Is this a proposition, and Mantesh, hold on just a sec, hopefully it'll fall into place. Is this saying something about Amrit or about the equivalence between video games and violence? Is it saying that whether or not Amrit, does that tell us much about Amrit? Or does it tell us much about the possibility of video games leading to violence? I mean, Amrit's mentioned in there, right? It's video games and violence, Liam. You're absolutely right. It quite literally links video games to violence and violence to video games in both ways, right? Even if Amrit is mentioned. Do we know by this proposition and this proposition alone whether or not Amrit plays video games? Yes or no? Can we tell whether or not that claim is true or false? It claims that he does, but we can't check. Remember? There's that yellow tape. Remember the yellow tape? We can't check. Does Amrit play video game? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. Did we get to ask him? No, we don't ask him. We can't check. Is Amrit violent? Don't know. We can't check. But it's saying if Amrit plays video games, then Amrit is violent. And if Amrit is violent, then he plays video games, right? And so what it's saying is, if you live in a world where this claim is true, right, were he to play video games, he'd have to be violent, but maybe he doesn't play video games. So in that world, let's go for world 4. Samuel, I'll put this on the shelf for a second. I'll read it in a moment. In world 4, Amrit doesn't play video games. Well, is he violent? Yes or no? It could totally be like this turns out to be false. He doesn't play video games. It's false. Is he violent? Yes or no? He's not violent. Because Amrit playing video games is equivalent to saying that Amrit is violent. Right? So the idea is this, is if I'm going to cross this side, I'm going to cross this side. And if I'm not going to cross this side, I'm not going to cross this side. That's all that it tracks. Sameness and difference. Samuel writes, is any causation included here, or is it simply the case that both gene and view are true? Yeah, there's no causation. Whole questions as to what could cause, because presumably if things co-vary, right? So here's the thing, right? Mark, sorry to go back, Mark farting is equivalent to people holding their nose, right? Suppose I make this claim. Mark farting is equivalent to people holding their nose. We'll say that's F, and we'll say holding your nose is, well, let's put N, right? Could be true, could be false. It's a whole compound proposition. Samuel, help me out. Could you hold your nose, please? Pinch your nose. Tell me when you're done. Type in done when you pinch your nose. All right, cool. Samuel, what world do we live in? World 1, 2, or 3, or 4? According to this proposition. So you've done a verification. Now you've done some empirical work, right? Well, we certainly live in 2 or 3. Agreed? Because actually you live in 3 because you did hold your nose. You're right. So Samuel's entirely right. We're in world 3. There you go. So you've falsified this proposition. You've shown a counterexample to it. You've shown that it's false, right? By doctoring a situation where this, what we call a constituent, by the way, this is the technical terms for either side of this stuff, right? Constituent. The right-hand constituent of the equivalence was true, and the left-hand constituent of the equivalent was false. You thereby have shown that this alleged equivalence doesn't hold. It is false. Samuel, does that clarify? Yeah, and notice though, importantly, the piece of verification that you did when you pinched your nose, that was correspondence, it wasn't coherence, right? So we're not actually concerned with that. We're only concerned with F is equivalent to N. N, there you go, right? And we don't care what those things stand for, and we don't care which world we're in. That's it. All right, so we have how many connectives so far? We did conjunction, disjunction. This is called an equivalence. And it's going to have this symbol. It's often called a biconditional also, right? So sometimes it's called biconditional, but I'm going to use in this course equivalence because it's a beautiful word. It tells me same valence. So equivalence, right? To say that they're equivalent means they have the same truth value. They co-varies, right? There you go. And I've got this as a symbol. I'm going to pause and check in with everyone. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. And Kamal, yes, if and only if, that would be the same thing. Yeah, that's a complicated expression for it that only philosophers use. Yeah. No, you know you're in the presence of a philosopher if they say if and only if, right? Like no one in their right mind uses that expression outside of philosophy. That's a technical expression to track equivalence. All right, let's do the last or second to last connective. This one's going to be the trickiest one. I've put it at the end, but you're going to meditate on it and it'll become clearer. If you graduate with distinction, then I will buy you a car. If you graduate with distinction, I will buy you a car. Well, let's let G stand for you graduate with distinction, and let's let C stand for I buy you a car. Well, that's a really cool thing. Let's put it in green. I buy you a car. That's green. And G is going to be you graduate with distinction. Let's find something that has the colors of KPU. There you go. Graduate with distinction. There you go. You graduate with distinction. Look, there's only 4 possibilities in the world. In world 1, you graduate with distinction, and I buy you a car. In world 2, you graduate with distinction, I don't buy you a car. In world 3, hold on, you're typing, you don't graduate with distinction, and I buy you a car. And in world 4, you don't graduate with distinction, and I don't buy you a car. Now pause and think really carefully. Which of these worlds would allow you to call me a liar who broke his promise? Let's say your parent promised you this. Which one could you say, you broke your promise? Agreed. Your parent or whoever said this would break their promise if, in fact, you graduated with distinction and it didn't buy you a car. Not 3, though. Because what would happen at 3? You didn't graduate with distinction, but you know what, Avneet? Your mom and your dad love you so much they bought you a car. You can't call them a liar, can you? Think of that, Avneet. Like, look at this here, right? You didn't graduate with distinction, but they still buy you a car. Can you say, you liar? Right? Exactly, James, right? They never said, it doesn't go both ways, right? And one of the things is this if-then, which is called a conditional, right, is going to be symbolized by this symbol, right? They never said it would go both ways, right? That's it, right? So let me just hold on here. Adjust. Well, I don't know why it's doing this. Contents. There you go. Well, that's even uglier. Auto fit window. There you go. That's even bigger. There you go. So imagine, for instance, your parents, you can say, well, look, you can't call them a liar, so you can't put F. We agree so far, so Avneet got it. There's only 2 possible truth values, true or false, and it's not going to be false, and what's it going to be? I said there's only T and F, and it ain't going to be F, so what's it going to be? There's only 2 possible truth values, true and false, T or F, and it's not going to be F, therefore it's going to be true. Conditionals, so this is a conditional, that's what this is called, a conditional, right? Conditionals are true, right, unless shown false. So essentially, there's a presumption of truth, right? Because this part here wasn't actually met. Like you didn't actually graduate with distinction. You can't say that it's false. There's only one world in which you can show that it's false, right? What happens here? You graduate with distinction. They buy you a car. Did they keep their promise? What they said, was it true or false? They did it. They honored their promise. They honored their promise. It's true. They honored their promise. It's true. You didn't graduate with distinction and they didn't buy you a car. What is that going to be? True or false? And they're your parents, for crying out loud. Be charitable here. They were speaking the truth. And if you don't agree that it was true, you'd have to put yourself in a world where they break their promise, and you'd have to go find a world in which two happens. Right? So here you have the basic truth table that shows the logical work done by a conditional. Now, the conditional is interesting because it's asymmetric. It goes one way, not the other way. Nothing precludes you from, let's say, buying a car, even if these conditions weren't met, right? If you can also say, this is why it's called conditional, right? On the condition that you graduate with distinction, on the condition that you graduate with condition, then I will buy you a car, right? The first part here states the condition under which this second thing is going to happen. Right? That's why it's called a conditional. So if these things happen, then these other things are going to happen. So if on the condition that this happens, then these other things ought to happen as well. This is what the conditional is called, the way it is. And because it's got this asymmetric structure, unlike this one, right, which went both ways, Clark Kent is Superman, Superman is Clark Kent, right? You can go back and forth. Unlike that one, we're going to need two terms to sort of capture what either side is. And we'll call this one side here the antecedent of the conditional, and we'll call the side here the consequent of the conditional, because they're very different animals, right? The antecedent are the conditions that need to be met, and the consequent are the things that we say are going to happen if those conditions are met, right? So we'll say that the left-hand side of the conditional is called the antecedent, and the right-hand side is called the consequent. Now, so far I've introduced a lot of jargon. Proposition, compound proposition, atomic proposition, conjunction, disjunction, disjuncts, conjuncts, equivalences, constituents, conditionals, antecedent, consequent. If you think you're overwhelmed, don't worry. Sensei Mark has a file at the top of the Moodle page that will be available as soon as we're done, where I say all of that again, plus you've got the recording. So far, I just want to pause. Is everything clear? If everything's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. As we're nearing the end, we're doing great for time. We're going to dock this boat right where we wanted it, right at the time we said we would. Everything is proceeding exactly as I have foreseen. This is a quote from Emperor Palpatine himself, right? All right. So now we have four conditionals. Let me zoom back here. Here's what we've done so far. Let me zoom back. We had an atomic proposition. It admits of two possible truth values all the time. We had conjunction. Conjunction had these four possible truth values. Tavneed, I appreciate it. And you're working really hard too, so I can't do it alone, huh? This is the disjunction, inclusive disjunction. These were its truth values. And remember, either side is always the same. We're always going to stick to this convention. True, true, false, false. True, false, true, false. We're mapping out four possible worlds here. World 1, World 2, World 3, World 4. We had equivalence. Equivalence is here. Finally, we had, well, not finally, we got one more, conditional. Conditional is one that, if you can wrap your mind around it logically, will make a lot of tidying up in your brain, because we often reason the wrong way around. It's a one-way street, but we often infer the other way, and there's no valid inference the other way around. So that's going to be really, in the long term, really pay off. And there's one more connective, and it's the simplest one. I've left it for last because by now we're a little tired. It's called negation, and you know all that. You know that one already. Negation, right? And negation just is, it's not the case that, and then you plug in an atomic proposition. So for instance, imagine that it's true that there's an elephant in Surrey. If it's true that there's an elephant in Surrey, anyone who says what I've selected would be saying a truth or a falsehood. The whole thing I've selected. If it's true that there's an elephant in Surrey, if we're in World 1, then anyone who says This compound proposition in blue is saying a truth or falsehood. Exactly, a falsehood. Conversely, if it's false that there is currently an elephant in Surrey, then anyone who says it's not the case that there's an elephant in Surrey is uttering a truth or a falsehood. A truth. You the old flipperoo. So not, right? It's not the case. That just flips the truth value. So if you've got a truth value that's true, then to negate it is to say a falsehood. And if the thing is in fact false, then to negate it is to utter a truth. So for instance, I don't have a clue, by the way, whether or not there's an elephant in Surrey, whether or not you're currently thinking of eggs, whether or not there's an even or an odd number of stars, but certainly I can map out that if I assert one of the things as true and it turns out to be false and vice versa, you add a not and it changes everything, right? Imagine I do this though. Let's have some fun. Imagine I say, it is not the case that there is currently an elephant in Surrey. And instead of saying there's currently an elephant in Surrey, I say, it is not the case that there is not currently an elephant in Surrey. So let me just kind of insert another column to the left here, right? Not E. Imagine we live in a world where there is an elephant in Surrey. What is the truth value of this entire thing? It's not the case that there is not currently an elephant in Surrey. What is the truth value of that? It reverts back to true, right? It's double negation. What about this one? If I say it's not the case that it's not the case that, yeah, they cancel each other out, right? They cancel each other out. So you go back to falsehood. Don't ever write a term paper with this because your teachers are going to rip their hair off and they need their hair, right? So don't write double negations. I told you, remember the monkey scratching their head? We can't deal with double negations. It's so bloody complicated, right? If I tell you it's not the case that I don't want to go with you tonight unless, some complicated, you're like already messed up, right? So that's negation, but we're only going to be right now just concerned with that basic truth table for it. This is the logical work done by not, and it's called negation. It's fairly straightforward, all right? So I'm going to stop share screening this right now, and we're going to do a summary of everything we've done. What do we have? We have 5 connectives. And oh, I forgot to mention its little symbol. It's a little wavy line like this. It's called a tilde. Little wavy line, right? Tilde. That's what we're going to be using. And all of those are available to you. You're going to take those symbols from a template that I'm going to make available on Moodle that right after we're done with class, one of your jobs is going to be to give yourself shortcut keys. So that's negation. Not whatever you put in this space over here, right? What do you plug in this space? Anything you want, right? What does P stand for? I don't know, whatever, right? Whatever you want. An atomic proposition. So there you go. That's negation. This is conjunction. What do we call either side of the conjunction? What are these sides called? Remember the technical term? Conjunct. That's right. Conjunct. That's right. And this is it. Remember the little symbol for it is this way, huh? That's a big difference between this and that. This is a disjunction. And remember, it's an inclusive disjunction. So essentially what it's saying is at least this or that is the case. And we put it this way, right? Here's our truth table for that. Equivalence, or sorry, conditional. If this, then that, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be a causal link. Like if I say, for instance, if I clap my hands, you jump. It's not like my clapping is causing you to jump, but I can say if I clap my hands, you jump. And there's only one condition under which it's turned out to be false, is when it's the antecedent is the case, but the consequent is not the case, right? In all other circumstances, it turns out as true. There's a kind of a presumption of truth unless you can show, and you have to show that you live in world 2 over here, unless you can falsify it. And by the way, if you like science, let's do a little bit of philosophy of science for a moment, right? Essentially, the progress of science marches as follows, right? You say, if this theory were true, then it would have the following observational consequences. Like if the theory were true, we'd expect to observe these things in the world. And essentially what you want to do in science is you want to try your darndest to end up in a situation where you show that the theory is not true, right? Precisely because you weren't able to obtain these observational consequences, and thus the claim turns out as true. But if it resists that attempt for you to falsify it, then it's in good standing. You have good reason to believe in the theory, right? And so finally we have the equivalence, right, which says equivalence, same truth value. Same, true. Different, false. Different, false. Same, true. There you go. So what are we going to do now? Well, we've learned this today. Now you know what they mean. If it all happened really quickly, you can watch the recording and go over it again. It's okay if you feel slightly overwhelmed, right? It's a lot to take in, and I told you it was going to be a tough class, but you're going to dream about this. So that's good. That's your subconscious processing this stuff. What you're going to do now is you're going to go on Moodle. This is your homework for the week. I want everyone to go on Moodle right now. I'm going to make available a file right underneath week 1. And I want you to, hold on. I want you to go underneath week 1. And I want you to see something that says step 1. And I want you to click on it. Can everyone go on our main Moodle page? Under week 1, it says step 1. Click on that. And once you have it, go back and tell us yes. Tell me yes. Yeah, James, you'll have to make the shortcut keys just like the way I'm going to show you in the instructions. So that's a Word file. That's a Word file. How many pages to that Word file do you see? How many pages is that Word file? 31. You're going to manually, with your typewriter, with your keyboard, fill in all of those grids manually, all 30 pages, without using copy-paste. Is that clear, everyone? This is the wax on, wax off part. I told you wax on, wax off. Right? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. You're going to do this by hand. You're going to fill up the whole thing. And in fact, you're going to do this like this afternoon. You're going to take a break. You're going to eat. You're going to, kiss your partner, hug your mom, do something like that. Right? But then you're going to do this today. Right? You're going to fill the whole thing. That's a lot of repetition. I promised you repetition. So that's one of the homeworks you're going to do. Right? So here's the homework. Avneet, you got to fill out that whole thing. Here's the whole homework, Avneet. So pay close attention. Here's what you got to do this week. You got lots of stuff to do because we're going to do this. It's going to be hard. First thing I want you to do, if you haven't done it already, please add your face to your Moodle profile. All right, so that's not very complicated, and I want to see everyone. And you can also add a description. It's very helpful. It lets me get to know you. That way I can know your names better, and it's going to make everything more pleasant. Another thing you need to do is you need to set up your shortcut keys. See the instructions in the template. I want everyone to go at the top of our Moodle page and click on Template and Shortcut Keys under Course Essentials. Once you've done that, go back and say yes. So you go on our main Moodle page. You should see a Word file that says Template and Shortcut Keys. Type in yes once you've downloaded that Word file. Make sure you take the time to do that now. Good. All right. On that sheet, you're going to have instructions on making shortcut keys for the symbols. Please follow those instructions and copy paste exactly the ones that I've given you. All right? Because that's what we'll use throughout the term. Another thing you're going to do this week as far as your homework is you're going to read our main document carefully. Remember, it's our lease. So you're signing a lease, you better read it carefully because the fine print matters. Also, you're going to do a bunch of drills. So underneath week 1, you'll see these drills, and that's going to require a lot of repetition. Some of them are just there for practice, but some are going to get graded, and they're going to get quicker and quicker. So you're going to need to memorize all of these basic tables that we did today and get quick at filling them up. And I mean quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an incentive, and in order to access the next drill, you have to get perfect. So you need a perfect result on one of the drills to access the next one. So you do step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you're going to keep ascending that way. You also have homework. We're going to transform language, normal language, English language into symbols. You've got 50 questions. So you're going to use your shortcut keys. You're going to open up a file and you're going to grade out the write out the answers, and you're going to grade yourself. I'm not checking your homework, okay? But you're going to have the answers so you can do the homework on your own and then grade yourself. And then finally, next week, we're going to keep practicing the skills that we started learning of turning English arguments into symbols. So not just propositions, but something a little more complex called an argument. That is your work for the week right now. You got to check all of those boxes and make sure you do all that before we talk to each other next week at 10 a.m. Is that clear, everyone? If that's crystal clear, type in crystal clear. If you've got a question, last call for question. Crystal clear, yes, sensei. Crystal clear or questions? Last call, because we're exactly at 12:15. We're doing perfect, like pow, on the spot. We start at 10, pow, we finish at 12:15. Last call for questions, and then we'll say goodbye. The drills have unlimited attempts. Yeah, so that's the good news, Anson. Yeah, unlimited attempts. And I don't want to see your homework, Dale. Anson's that answer your question. Dale's that answer your question. Yeah, I don't want to see your homework. You grade yourself. It's between you and you. Yeah, it'll make a difference when it comes time for quizzes and exam and tests, though. That's when it's going to show. For sure, for sure. So only you and God know, right, whether or not you did it. I'm certainly not going to check. Yeah. No, it's not okay, James. So the shortcut symbols have to be exactly like the ones I give you. So anyone who has other shortcuts, you've done something that looks like logic in another course, do mine and only mine. Yep. Because we all need to talk the same language. I'm not going to sort of, do whatever. Edric, sounds good. My friends, if there are no further questions, then we say goodbye and you click out and get to work. Mantej, take care. Ça se calme, my friends. À la prochaine. Let's say goodbye. Edric, take care. Ciao. Said, have a good day as well. Isabel, thanks as well. Thank you for making a good class. Dale, cheers, my friend. Anako, great questions. Salut, take care. À la prochaine. And we could totally stay after class to talk. Kelly, you could totally do that. I'll be the last one to leave. Liam, goodbye. Avneet, have a good day. Mitrio, Anson, take care. Avneet, bye. Great questions today. Sakshi, good. We're off to a good start. I agree. Kamal, take care. Ignore, bye-bye. Jackson, see you next week. 10 a.m. Monday, sharp. Sasikal, Kartik. Pardia, take care. Thanks. Yeah, after class, I'll sort of sift people in their different questions, but there's an opportunity to unmute for sure. Raman, take care. Have a nice day too. I just want to get a sense of who's sticking around and for what, and then I'll triage that, and then I'll be the last one to leave. There's no hurry. We did what we had to do, and now I can allow myself to get done. Hey, Sam, it's good to have you in my class. Oh, that's terrific. Glad that you're in metaphysics. That's going to be also a fun one. And they're going to go well together. It's going to pay off. We'll actually do slightly more advanced logic in metaphysics for our needs. Yeah. Cool. Go do those drills, Edric, and good luck. Wax on, wax off, my pupil. It will all pay off. Trust me. Month 2, you'll be like, man, I'm glad I did all that. You can kick some butt. Just like the Karate Kid. That's right. All right. Good stuff, my friends. So Kelly, we can check. Avneet, do you need anything from me? Kartik, if you know how to log out, it's the upper right. There's a button you can go. Avneet, do you need me for something? No, you're good? All right, well, have a good week and good luck with the work, okay? You did great today. Keep bringing it. Be alert. Have coffee or tea or whatever keeps you aware. Red Bull or it's all good. Cool. Kelly, I'm going to stop the recording right now, and then we can chat either through the chat bar or through unmuting. So let me just stop that.